In the previous episode, Han Li joined a secretive meeting of Nascent Soul cultivators, only to learn a shocking truth. Marquis Nanlong had discovered the final hideout of the legendary mad cultivator. Master Cang Kun, once feared across both the righteous and devilish paths. Thought to have died under siege, Cang Kun had actually escaped Devilfall Valley alive, carrying priceless treasures and secret arts. But his final refuge is now sealed behind an ancient restriction, one of the 10 greatest ever created, requiring 8 cultivators with exceptionally strong spiritual sense to break. Despite the danger of entering the Moulan Plains, a territory teeming with powerful spell warriors, the promise of Cang Kun's hidden legacy proved irresistible. One by one, the gathered cultivators agreed to join the expedition, even as Marquis Nanlong declared that he and his partner would claim first pick of the treasures. What will happen next? Stay tuned. And the story continues. The others didn't find it strange for Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man surnamed Yun to have first pick, since they were both the founders of this expedition and had the deepest cultivation. It was natural for them to have a larger share of the treasure. Their authority and strength were unquestioned, and so the group easily accepted their leadership. To avoid any trouble or betrayal later on, everyone took a solemn hard demon oath not to reveal what they had discussed. With that, the meeting quietly dissolved, and the 9 cultivators left with their own thoughts. Han Li noticed the calm confidence in Marquis Nanlong and the old man surnamed Yun. Neither seemed worried that the early Nascent Soul cultivators in the group might attempt anything devious. And for good reason. The location of the Devilfall Valley entrance, as well as the only known method to break its fearsome spell restrictions, were secrets held only by those two. Even if the others had schemes in their hearts, none would dare act without that crucial knowledge. Han Li silently acknowledged the logic. In the world of cultivation, information could be more valuable than power. Still, his own thoughts drifted toward his painfully slow advancement. After reaching the Nascent Soul stage, progress in the Azure Essence sword arts had nearly stagnated. Without rare medicinal pills, even 300 years of bitter cultivation would likely fail to push him to the peak of the early stage. As for reaching the middle stage, that felt less like a goal and more like a gamble with fate. Every cultivator standing at this level had already surpassed countless others in talent. Breaking through further required not only effort, but treasures, opportunities, and extraordinary luck. Originally, Han Li planned to spend centuries quietly cultivating after the trade fair. Once he refined his core techniques, he would leave his cave residence in search of ancient ruins or spiritual lands filled with natural treasures. Only such places offered the chance for real advancement. But the mention of the Devilfall Valley, a place notorious for devouring countless cultivators yet rumored to contain immense treasures, ignited a spark of determination in him. This might be the turning point he needed, the very opportunity he could not ignore. Judging by the expressions of the other Nascent Soul eccentrics, they felt exactly the same. There was another matter lingering in Han Li's heart. The Ghost Spirit sect's young master, Wang Chan, would be accompanying them on this expedition. If an opportunity presented itself along the way, Han Li did not intend to hesitate. Whatever Wang Tiangu thought of it made no difference, after all. The Ghost Spirit sect and the Heavenly Tao Alliance were already sworn enemies. The road to Devilfall Valley was long, and accidents in the wilderness were far from rare. As such thoughts sharpened Han Li's killing intent, he walked down the Azure Stone Road toward his temporary residence, unaware that elsewhere, Wang Tiangu, Wang Chan, and Yan Ruyan held a private conversation of their own. Wang Tiangu calmly warned the two juniors that Han Li still harbored hatred and might attempt an ambush. Wang Chan, regretful and anxious, admitted that a careless act from his past had created a powerful enemy. He never expected that Han Li would achieve 2 major breakthroughs, core formation and Nascent Soul, in such a short span. Wang Tiangu, however, assured him that with the might of the Blood Spirit arts and their combined strength, they could still form their own Nascent Soul eventually. Even so, the elder warned them to stay together during the upcoming journey to the Moulan Plains, where dangers lurked everywhere. Meanwhile, Han Li spent the following day gathering materials at great speed. Before leaving, He carefully instructed Mu Peeling to remain cautious. And he specially asked Lu Luo to watch over her. Lu Luo was surprised by Han Li's sudden departure before the trade fair ended. But he didn't question it and agreed immediately, which left Han Li with a favorable impression of the man. Han Li then returned to his residence and meditated until the appointed time arrived. When it did, he departed for a small mountain roughly 500 kilometers south of Soaring Heaven City. After 6 hours of travel, the 9 cultivators gathered, though the 3 from the Ghost Spirit sect were the last to arrive. Something Han Li noticed with a subtle flicker of suspicion. Marquis Nanlong spoke only 2 words, "We go." The group then rose into the sky and sped south toward the Moulan Plains. The state of Yu lay closest to the Moulan territory, yet there was no clear border, only a desolate wilderness stretching 5,000 kilometers. This barren land, full of howling winds and drifting yellow sands, had been a battlefield between the 9 Nations Union and the Moulan Spell Warriors for countless years. Blood soaked this land deeper than water, even during times of peace. The region remained perilous. Cultivators roamed here for many reasons. Some hunted each other for treasures. Others sought breakthroughs through combat, and many simply wandered and never returned. Most who roamed the desert were Foundation establishment cultivators, with the occasional core formation expert appearing like a storm to scatter the weak. Nascent Soul cultivators, however, were almost never seen. Such mighty figures wouldn't bother with small skirmishes. Because of that, Han Li's group remained relaxed as they crossed the air above the wilderness. Traveling 5,000 kilometers was trivial for Nascent Soul experts, so they didn't rush. Marquis Nanlong and Old Man Yun alternated using their vast spiritual senses to survey the path, while the others followed in a loose formation. They passed over several low-grade cultivators along the way, none of whom even sensed their presence. But after about an hour of travel, the white-clothed old man abruptly halted mid-air. Marquis Nanlong blinked in surprise. "Brother Yun, what happened?" He sent his own spiritual sense forward, trying to detect whatever had caused the interruption. The rest of the group exchanged glances before releasing their own spiritual senses as well. Even though they hadn't truly entered the Moulan Plains yet, being cautious was always wise, especially when dealing with unknown dangers. As their senses swept across the distance, they all sensed it, a strange, violent disturbance ahead, the air twisting unnaturally. The old woman among them frowned deeply. Her voice grew heavy with certainty. "That wind isn't merely suspicious. There is certainly something wrong with it. Such a gale cannot naturally occur." Han Li's spiritual sense discovered that there was a yellow gale surging across the horizon. It was over 300 meters tall and carried both stone and sand. It was truly malevolent, as if an evil dragon had sprung from the earth. The moment Han Li sensed it, he felt the vast pressure rolling from within that storm. A pressure so fierce and unnatural that even the surrounding world seemed distorted. Although the others in the group could only extend their spiritual senses to around 50 kilometers. Han Li's spiritual sense, strengthened by the Great Development Technique, pushed far beyond that. He allowed his condensed spiritual sense to enter the sandstorm, trying to pierce deeper into the raging wall of yellow wind. But the moment it entered, his spiritual sense dimmed, as though swallowed by an unseen force. He could barely extend it a few hundred meters inside the storm before everything dissolved into obscurity. No silhouettes, no traces of energy, only chaos. The group gathered behind him in silence until Marquis Nanlong finally spoke. A troubled look on his face, he explained that this phenomenon was likely the wind spirit technique of the Moulan Spell Warriors. Han Li listened closely. He already knew that the Moulan possessed powerful spirit techniques that differed from the magic techniques of Heavenly South cultivators. But hearing the Marquis's tone, even he felt a twinge of caution. A storm capable of blocking spiritual sense, shielding those inside, and defending against attacks was already troublesome on its own. But this one was thousands of times larger than anything Marquis Nanlong had ever witnessed. The moment the others heard the mention of Moulan Spell Warriors, their faces darkened in unison. Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan, who had the weakest cultivation among them, were immediately pale. Even for Nascent Soul cultivators, the Moulan's large-scale spirit techniques were no trivial matter. The white-clothed old man confirmed the Marquis's judgment, noting that only a spirit technique could produce such an unnatural storm. And the sheer scale meant there had to be many spell warriors present. With their current party, it would be impossible to break through them directly. As the group digested this, the old woman voiced her confusion. Why would the Moulans suddenly send out so many spell warriors? Had something changed? Wang Tiangu responded with a sigh and reminded her of the last ceasefire. Nearly a century had passed, more than enough time for the Moulan to prepare for another war. And if that were true, the sandstorm before them might very well be the first movement of a large-scale invasion. A somber heaviness settled on the entire group. War between the Heavenly South and the Moulan was always brutal, costing the lives of countless cultivators. To stumble into the vanguard of such a conflict by accident was a disastrous twist of fate. The white-clothed old man then laid the party's options bare. They could retreat, return to safety, and give up their immediate pursuit of the Devilfall Valley treasure. The treasure was not going anywhere, after all, but the Moulan assault would last for many years. And regrouping this same team again afterward would be nearly impossible. Alternatively, they could take the dangerous route and attempt to bypass the storm from the side, concealing themselves and slipping past the Moulan vanguard. If they could succeed, the Moulan Plains would be completely unguarded behind the battlefront, giving them the freedom to search for their objective without interference. Everyone understood the risks, yet none wanted to lose their chance at the treasures. As Nascent Soul cultivators, they could not afford to wait centuries for another opportunity. They agreed to proceed with stealth. Before they advanced, they each sent long-range letter talismans to the nearest stronghold of the Nine Nations Union, warning them of the impending invasion. It was their duty as cultivators of the Heavenly South. Then, masking their auras and shrinking their presence, the group of 9 slipped away to the edge of the storm, hoping to avoid the strongest concentration of spell warriors. Because Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan were weaker, Wang Tiangu shrouded them in a protective light barrier and moved them ahead. Though they attempted to hide, Han Li's spiritual sense tracked them easily. It was clear that Wang Tiangu's concealing technique could not fool him. The sandstorm grew closer at terrifying speed. Despite being 50 kilometers away only moments ago, it now surged forward like an expanding sea of destruction. Even before it arrived, smaller tornadoes burst forth, slicing across the plains. The group kept well away from the storm's center, barely avoiding the deadly spiraling columns of sand and stone. Within each tornado, Han Li sensed blurred outlines, Moulan spell warriors standing within the spinning winds, moving in unison toward the battlefield. The spell warriors did not detect Han Li and the others, simply passing by like silent phantoms. Then a massive tornado appeared, hundreds of meters wide and towering into the sky, charging directly toward them. It was so large that the party instantly tightened their grip on their magic treasures, preparing for battle should they be discovered. Even Han Li quietly awakened his bamboo cloud swarm swords, ready to draw them at a moment's notice. Though he had heard much about the spell warriors' prowess, this was his first time facing them in person. Fortunately, the giant tornado rushed past without reacting to their presence, leaving Marquis Nanlong and the rest visibly relieved. Moments later, the full force of the sandstorm swallowed them whole. Their surroundings became a suffocating sea of yellow darkness. Sand brushed past their bodies in endless waves, and yet they dared not disperse it with their magic power, lest they reveal their position. Marquis Nanlong reminded everyone with a calm voice transmission not to release their spiritual senses and to remain close together. The sandstorm's pressure was heavy, but they continued pushing deeper, moving carefully through the chaotic winds. After the time it took to eat a modest meal, Han Li suddenly felt a subtle wrongness. He slowed his movements, scanning the haze around him. Then, abruptly, he shot upward, halting in midair. His unexpected action startled the rest of the party, who quickly surrounded him with puzzled expressions. The old woman frowned and demanded to know why he had stopped. Han Li's expression remained cold as he replied, asking whether they truly felt nothing strange. The tan man reappeared beside him, confused, but Han Li continued, pointing out the obvious. They had been moving inside the sandstorm for far too long, yet had encountered no spell warriors at all. The scenery around them had remained exactly the same. No change in the storm's structure. No shifts in energy. No traces of movement. In such a massive storm, spell warriors should have been everywhere. But instead, it felt as though they were walking in circles. The implication hit everyone at the same time. Someone had placed a restriction around them. The tan man muttered gravely that someone had trapped them deliberately, and his eyes darkened with hostility as he studied the environment. Marquis Nanlong's face tightened as he processed this, and after a long moment, he nodded in grim acceptance. After a moment of silence, Marquis Nanlong nodded his head and sullenly said, "Fellow Taoist Han should be telling the truth. I also feel that something is strange. It seems we've been truly detected and they've used a technique to deal with it." A fight is unavoidable. The other cultivators remained calm after hearing this. Each of them realized that spell restrictions were used to trap them because the enemy lacked the forces to engage them. However, they could not remain trapped for too long, else the Moulan's reinforcements would arrive. As the wind howled around them and the sandstorm pressed in from every direction, each Nascent Soul cultivator released a glow of power, illuminating the swirling yellow world around them. Their spells and artifacts struck outward in coordinated bursts, probing the boundary of the illusion that imprisoned them. Hovering above the shifting sands, Han Li lifted his hand and sent 3 streaks of azure light flying into the distance. They vanished into the storm like arrows, sharp and decisive. Almost immediately, ripples formed in the air around them. The fabric of the restriction trembled as if struck by invisible hands. And in the next instant, the yellow light around them tore like brittle parchment. A gap opened wide enough for several people to pass through. The others exchanged startled looks. Something that had seemed so formidable had fallen apart far too easily. Han Li's expression shifted, showing a seriousness that made the others' hearts tighten. Without hesitation he shot forward, slipping through the opening before anything could change. His abrupt movement shocked the remaining cultivators. But once they understood, they followed him with unwavering trust. Outside the restriction, the storm was still harsh, but the oppressive weight pressing on their senses lifted. Han Li quietly exhaled, then sent his spiritual perception outward, attempting to judge their direction. The storm still interfered with his senses, but he focused intently, until he suddenly froze. His eyes narrowed, and a faint blue radiance surfaced in his pupils, flashing with a demonic luster as he stared toward a specific region of swirling sand. Just then Marquis Nanlong flew up beside him, puzzled to find Han Li perfectly still. The Marquis swept his spiritual perception forward but detected nothing. Confused, he asked why Han Li had stopped. Han Li replied calmly that he had only been thinking, and then asked which direction they should head next. Somewhat annoyed, Marquis Nanlong responded that spiritual perception was nearly useless within this sandstorm, and even the naked eye could not be trusted. However, he fortunately possessed a treasure suited for navigating under such conditions. He withdrew a faint red jade disc from his waist. While holding the disc with one hand, he performed an arcane gesture with the other and murmured a cryptic incantation. A beam of golden light burst from his palm and struck a symbol on the disc. The jade plate flared with a strange red-gold radiance. Intricate constellations shimmered across its surface, stars, sun, moon, and astrological patterns shifting like a celestial map. Han Li watched with interest, recognizing the complexity of the treasure. The others gathered closer, curiosity written plainly on their faces. Marquis Nanlong focused on the shifting lights until, after a moment, he sealed the glow and put the disc away. Without further explanation, he declared that they should follow him, then transformed into a streak of golden light and sped off. The others wordlessly followed, trusting in his confidence and the jade disc's guidance. Not far behind, Wang Tiangu appeared in a flash of black light, carrying Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan with him. As he passed Han Li, Wang Tiangu gave him a subtle, unreadable glance before flying ahead. Han Li responded with a faint, enigmatic smile. Meanwhile, Wang Chan lowered his head, avoiding Han Li's eyes as if he dared not meet them, while Yan Ruyan looked directly at Han Li, her calm, luminous gaze lingering for a brief heartbeat before turning away. Han Li drifted toward the rear of the group, still wearing a casual smile. Azure light flickered around him as he prepared to set off after them. But before he ascended, he cast one more involuntary glance toward the direction where he had sensed something earlier. His expression shifted, part curiosity, part cold understanding. He let out a quiet, icy chuckle, then shot into the storm. As soon as he vanished into the swirling sands, a brilliant flash of yellow light erupted from the area he had been observing. The ground tore open to reveal a vast dark hole. From within, an enormous black insect crawled out, its presence both terrifying and deeply unnatural. The creature was shaped like a monstrous disc, 20 meters long and more than a dozen meters wide. Its head was covered in dozens of dark yellow compound eyes, each reflecting the storm like cold, watchful orbs. Thin, almost blade-like horns protruded from its head, and a pair of massive fangs gleamed with a metallic chill. 4 transparent wings hummed softly at its back. Standing atop this terrifying creature were 3 figures. One was cloaked in a dazzling white light, another shrouded in thick green mist, and the last surrounded by crackling blue lightning that danced around him like living serpents. The figure of white light watched the direction Han Li's group had disappeared into and spoke with concern. He wondered if they should have let the intruders go so easily. The green mist figure responded sharply and dismissively, declaring that it was impossible for an illusion formation to hold cultivators of that caliber. Most of them were nascent soul stage, and even the weakest were late core formation. Their yellow sand tribe had never possessed the strength to truly restrain people of that level. The white light figure then voiced another worry. What would they tell Sage Mu of the Heavenly Wind tribe? He had personally ordered them to stop the intruders at all costs. With the vanguard under his command, Sage Mu had already begun summoning other grand sages. Should they use their sacred tribe protecting artifact, the Devil Earth banner, to trap the cultivators? The green mist figure erupted in anger, chastising him harshly. The Devil Earth banners were sacred, passed down through countless generations, to be used only when the tribe faced complete destruction. If they released them merely to stall a group of powerful cultivators, several banners might be destroyed in the struggle, leaving their tribe vulnerable to rivals and predators among the 10 great tribes. The white light figure immediately apologized for his careless suggestion. The lightning-shrouded warrior then spoke calmly, agreeing that Sage Mu intended to use their tribe as expendable pawns. The Heavenly Wind tribe and the Yellow Sand tribe had never been on good terms. And now that they were allied, Sage Mu had no incentive to protect their strength. He would simply appear when both sides were wounded, claim victory, and seize all the credit. However, he believed that the wind-riding chariot of the Heavenly Wind tribe could still overtake the fleeing cultivators. Once enough tribesmen gathered to activate it, the chase might turn in their favor, though whether they could catch the targets in time remained uncertain. The green mist figure disagreed, arguing that gathering enough people would take too long. Yet after a moment, he dismissed the entire matter, claiming that whether the cultivators escaped was irrelevant. Instead, he confessed something that had bothered him greatly: the young cultivator who had broken through the formation first. That youth had somehow discovered the location of their concealed tunnel. He explained that the Zumi insect beneath them was a creature of ancient times, prized not for combat but for its innate ability to tear open brief spatial crevices. Its concealment was extraordinary, strong enough to hide even from mid-stage nascent soul cultivators. And yet, Han Li, only an early nascent soul cultivator, had detected them. The Grand Sage admitted he was deeply puzzled. Only 2 possibilities existed: either that young cultivator possessed a rare secret technique for detection, or he carried an incredibly powerful probing treasure. It seemed that youth was an exceptional character. If it is not due to a particular secret technique, then it must be from an exceptionally powerful probing treasure. A trace of bewilderment could be heard from the Grand Sage's voice. Han Li followed after Marquis Nanlong and company, flying through the sandstorm for tens of kilometers. During this time, not one spell warrior had appeared before them. It was clear that some warning had already been sent ahead, and that the opposing forces no longer intended to block them directly. As he traveled, Han Li's thoughts naturally returned to what he had unintentionally discovered when he first broke through the restriction inside the sandstorm. because his spiritual sense had been completely suppressed by the raging winds and stinging sand. His only option was to channel spiritual power into his eyes and rely on the ability granted by the Brightside water. He had already used this spirit water several times in the past to cleanse and enhance his vision. So, when he found himself in a situation where he could not see anything clearly, he decided to test how far this transformation had progressed. The result had surprised even him. His spirit sight pierced through the sandstorm with astonishing clarity, revealing details that even nascent soul cultivators normally could not perceive. And within that murky storm, he suddenly saw a circular shadow about 40 meters away. Startled, his focus slipped for a brief moment and the spiritual power drained from his eyes, causing the shadow to vanish instantly. The sandstorm once again became nothing but a swirling, opaque mass. Refocusing, he infused his eyes with spirit power once more, and the shadow reappeared in the exact same spot. Determined to understand what he was seeing, he pushed even more power into his vision. The outlines grew slightly clearer, revealing faint silhouettes shifting inside. That was the absolute limit of what he could discern, but it was enough for him to understand the truth. A concealed group of Moulan spell warriors was observing them from within a hidden spatial pocket. He did not know what uncanny technique or artifact they were using, but it was definitely a method capable of evading the senses of nascent soul cultivators. Since they had chosen not to attack and only wished to monitor his group, Han Li had pretended not to notice them. And now, judging from the silence throughout the sandstorm, his guess was correct. The Watchers had decided not to provoke the intruders any further. As soon as Han Li's party finally broke free from the yellow sandstorm, they immediately accelerated. Blades of light tore through the sky as everyone pushed themselves to their highest speed. Although they had managed to slip past the vanguard, the Moulan main force would not be far behind. If the group failed to escape the sandy region before the larger army arrived, there would be nowhere left to run. The main force would definitely include several high-grade spell warriors as strong as nascent soul cultivators, accompanied by countless lesser spell warriors who could wear down their strength through sheer numbers. For that reason, Marquis Nanlong and the rest flew as if their lives depended on it. Hours passed. With their immense cultivation base and extraordinary movement techniques, they finally glimpsed a faint green shimmer far ahead, vegetation. It marked the edge of the Moulan Plains. The sight filled everyone with relief. Marquis Nanlong exhaled long and deeply. Good, we can finally relax. We managed to get through without a single mishap. His speed slowed as exhaustion began to show. Flying at such intense speed for half a day was a heavy burden even for nascent soul stage cultivators. The tan-skinned cultivator also spoke with visible ease. Yes, we have gone this far without trouble. No matter how desperate they are, the Moulan will not catch up now. But before anyone could truly relax, the white-haired old man abruptly cut himself short. He had been trying to warn everyone not to let down their guard when he suddenly felt something. His eyes widened, and he turned toward the rear in alarm. Han Li sensed the seriousness of his reaction and instinctively prepared to speak. But before he could say anything, a sharp cracking sound pierced the air behind them. Within moments, the strange sound grew louder, vibrating through the heavens. Everyone focused their attention behind them. A flickering white light appeared on the distant horizon, rapidly expanding as it drew nearer. It was a fast-moving sphere of radiance, racing through the air at a speed that surpassed any ordinary flying treasure. The white-clothed old man's expression twisted the moment he recognized it. Not good. That is the spell warrior's wind-riding chariot. They would not dare to chase us unless they had several nascent soul-grade spell warriors reinforcing them. Wang Tiangu swiftly swept his spiritual sense toward the incoming light. His voice deepened. There are 5 nascent soul spell warriors inside the chariot. They do not intend to defeat us, they only want to entangle us and delay us until reinforcements arrive. Marquis Nanlong immediately understood the danger. We cannot allow them to hold us down. It is impossible to defeat 5 nascent soul spell warriors in a short amount of time. And if they surround us, escaping will become even harder. We must scatter now. Everyone take 1 jade slip. He quickly handed out several identical jade talismans. Remember the location carved inside. In 3 days we will regroup there." Even as he spoke, the approaching wind-riding chariot grew louder, the crackling sound tearing through the air like thunder. "Fellow Taoists, take care. I will see you again in 3 days." Marquis Nanlong wrapped himself in golden light and shot away without another word. The white-clothed old man transformed into a streak of white radiance and soared off in a completely different direction. The rest of the group also scattered instantly, each relying on their own secret methods. The tan cultivator erupted into towering yellow flames before plunging straight into the earth, disappearing without a trace. The elderly woman summoned a silver crane hairpin, breathed spiritual energy onto it, and was soon riding atop a large white crane that soared upward with a piercing cry. The stern-faced cultivator merged his body with a silver treasure, transforming into a massive silver flood dragon before vanishing into the clouds. Wang Tiangu, Wang Chan, and Yan Ruyan wrapped themselves in an immense wave of black light and shot across the horizon at incredible speed. In only a heartbeat, the three became no more than distant specks. Han Li acted at nearly the same instant he caught the jade slip. His body glowed with red light as a crimson cloak formed around him. He infused it with tremendous spiritual power. With a resonant hum, the cloak erupted with radiance and propelled him forward like a scarlet comet. Despite traveling at such high speed, he still found a moment to glance back at the pursuing wind-riding chariot. Although still far behind, Han Li's powerful spiritual sense allowed him to observe it clearly. The chariot was unlike anything he had ever seen, white in color, but seemingly constructed of the bones of some ancient beast, radiating a faintly sinister aura. It had no wheels at all. Instead, a pair of 20-meter-long dark crimson wooden wings stretched from its sides, covered in floating talisman symbols that shimmered with rainbow-colored light. He could vaguely make out the figures sitting within the glowing white light. But because he had never fought spell warriors before, he did not dare probe their strength directly. Instead, he turned his attention forward and poured even more power into the crimson cloak, flying southward toward the heart of the Moulan Plains. Within a short time, Han Li and the others had spread out over a distance of more than 5 kilometers from one another. When the wind-riding chariot finally reached the point where the group had scattered, Han Li risked another look over his shoulder. The chariot came to a sudden halt. 4 silhouettes emerged from it, 3 men and 1 woman. The 4 gathered briefly, exchanged a few quick words, and then split up, each chasing after a different fleeing cultivator. Fortunately, none of them chose Han Li's direction. Han Li exhaled in relief. But that relief lasted only a moment. A sudden realization struck him, and he growled inwardly, "Not good." The wind-riding chariot pulsed with blinding white light once more. This time, instead of chasing someone else, it hurled itself directly toward Han Li at astonishing speed, emitting sharp crackling sounds that pierced the mind like needles. Han Li's expression darkened as he felt its violent spiritual pressure locking onto him. He let out a cold snort and unleashed more power. His entire body burst into shining radiance as the crimson cloak hummed loudly, pushing his speed even higher. In the sky, a glowing white sphere pursued a crimson sphere, the 2 blazing lights streaking across the vast plains with only a distance of about 5 kilometers between them. Although the wind-riding chariot was terrifyingly fast, the crimson cloak was far from ordinary. For a time, neither side could gain the upper hand. They remained locked in a fierce chase, neither able to close nor widen the gap. A short moment later, the 2 spheres of light disappeared from the edge of the plains as they flew deeper towards the heart of the Moulan Plains. With the astonishing speed of both Han Li's crimson cloak and the wind-riding chariot, they deeply headed over 50 kilometers deep into the Moulan Plains. As Han Li pushed the crimson cloak to its absolute limit, he continuously swept his spiritual sense behind him. What he felt made his expression tighten. Even while exerting the full might of the cloak, he could not widen the gap. Instead, the chariot was slowly but steadily closing the distance, shrinking half the space between them. In that instant, he finally understood why the old man surnamed Yun had reacted with such alarm earlier. The wind-riding chariot was not merely fast. It was a top-grade flight treasure capable of threatening even mid-level Nascent Soul cultivators. Han Li weighed his options quickly. Unless he used lightning movement or his blood shadow evasion, he would not be able to escape this pursuit. But choosing to flee without testing the strength of his pursuer left a sense of dissatisfaction within him. Ever since forming his nascent soul, he had gained power, treasures, and confidence, yet he had never fought an opponent of equal realm. At the Drifting Cloud sect, he had only exchanged casual discussions of techniques with the elders. During the events at Soaring Skies City, he had sparred only with Marquis Nanlong in a contest of spiritual sense. None of these encounters had revealed his true combat power. But now, a spell warrior of nascent soul level was chasing him alone through the dangerous heart of the Moulan Plains. It was risky, but it was also the perfect opportunity. If he could repel, or even defeat, the pursuer, the encounter would reveal exactly where he stood among nascent soul experts. And if the battle turned against him, he could instantly escape using his thunderstorm wings. As long as he did not linger for too long, he would not be surrounded by reinforcements. With his decision made, a surge of determination flashed across Han Li's eyes. The crimson glow around his body flickered wildly and then abruptly vanished. In its place, a brilliant eruption of azure light surrounded him as he halted midair and turned to face his pursuer. The distant white light of the oncoming chariot grew larger as he raised his sleeve. Several tens of azure sword lights streaked forward, swirling with sharp hums through the air. With rapid movements, he commanded them into a densely layered formation, spreading across the sky like an azure cloud ready to descend in fury. Because this was his first true battle against a nascent soul cultivator, he held nothing back. Alongside his 72 bamboo cloud swarm swords, he reached to his spirit beast pouch and sent it flying into the air. A thick, dark cloud erupted from it, a massive swarm of black-tinted gold-devouring beetles that filled the sky. He completed a quick incantation gesture and struck the swarm with 2 spell seals. The countless insects shrank and condensed, swirling rapidly around him until they fused into a tri-colored armor of hardened chitin. The armor gleamed faintly with azure radiance, its surface flowing with a fierce, ancient aura. Just as Han Li finished preparing, the wind-riding chariot arrived. Slowing as if startled, the spell warrior inside caught sight of the astonishing transformation. Swords, artifacts, and a living suit of armor formed from spiritual insects. For a brief moment, the chariot hovered 300 meters away, the white radiance around it flickering uncertainly. Han Li did not allow the spell warrior time to adjust. He raised both hands, summoning a flower basket in one hand and a small silver bell in the other. With a flick of his wrist, the silver bell flew forward, expanding instantly to a massive size. A flash of silver light burst from within as the bell rotated high above the chariot. Low, continuous hums rippled outward, forming powerful waves of sound capable of crushing magical artifacts. Simultaneously, he commanded his sword lights to split and multiply. The 72 swords transformed into 216 glowing blades that surged forward in a sweeping 300-meter wave. The massive wall of blades followed immediately behind the giant bell, as if determined to smash the chariot to pieces in one overwhelming strike. Above the chariot, the silver bell unleashed its might. Invisible ripples of condensed sound burst outward, threatening to envelop everything beneath it. Han Li knew that if the spell warrior stayed still, the sound waves would inflict devastating damage. With the strength of his current cultivation, this treasured bell was now many times more powerful than when he wielded it as a core formation cultivator. But the wind-riding chariot reacted immediately. Its dark red wooden wings gave a sharp flap, and the chariot shot forward over 30 meters, narrowly dodging the descending wave of sound. A vast bloom of white light followed, and a silhouette flew out of the chariot, floating calmly in the air above it. At that very moment, the huge azure wave of swordlight swept toward the chariot from below. The silhouette lifted a hand with practiced ease. A deep blue barrier appeared above the chariot, shimmering like a dome of flowing water. Han Li's sword wave crashed into the barrier with a thunderous boom. Ripples trembled across the surface, but the barrier held firm. Han Li narrowed his eyes, instantly realizing an important detail. The barrier was not produced through spiritual technique. It was being projected by an object held within the spell warrior's palm. The spell warrior muttered something under his breath and spat a thin blue thread from his mouth. The thread expanded rapidly, twisting and reshaping into a huge azure python formed entirely from condensed spiritual power. Its eyes shone with fierce intelligence as it lunged toward the sword wave, causing a violent clash of azure and blue light. The air itself buzzed from the collision. Meanwhile, the spell warrior struck the wind-riding chariot with a spell seal. The chariot instantly shrank in a streak of white light until it was the size of a palm, then flew straight into the man's hand. He placed it away in his storage pouch before raising his head. His face became fully visible at last, a shriveled old man with azure tattoos running across his cheeks, dressed in elaborate blue robes embroidered in an unfamiliar style. Han Li felt a jolt of surprise. The old man's spiritual pressure surged outward. It was shockingly powerful, far beyond ordinary early Nascent Soul cultivators. He stood at the absolute peak of early Nascent Soul, only half a step from breaking into the mid-stage. No wonder he had blocked Han Li's initial assault with such ease. The azure python, the barrier, and the pearl, none of it was simple. The pearl, especially, radiated potent fluctuations as it hovered above the old man's hand. Feeling his opponent's strength, Han Li's expression hardened. He gripped the flower basket tightly, spiritual light swirling around it, preparing to unleash its full might. But at that moment, the old man called out sharply, "Cease! Although your esteemed self possesses vast ability, are you not being too impatient? I have yet to speak, and you immediately attack." His tone was harsh but not hostile. Han Li let the silver bell pause and slowly dimmed the flower basket. His eyes remained cold as he replied, "What words are there to be exchanged between cultivators and spell warriors?" Still, he held his ground, prepared for either conversation or battle. The old man chuckled dryly. "At our cultivation level, there is no need for needless slaughter. If you answer a few questions for me, I can let you leave unharmed." Han Li sneered, "I have nothing to tell you, but perhaps you should be the one answering my questions." He knew exactly what the old man wanted, an explanation for why so many Nascent Soul cultivators had appeared together. The old man's expression darkened. "It seems fellow Taoist rejects my goodwill." Han Li responded only with a cold snort. Raising his finger toward the sky, he commanded his scattered sword lights to condense. Azure radiance surged inward, forming a single massive sword over 100 meters long. In a flash of light, the sword cleaved downward, shattering the azure python into fragments before continuing toward the blue barrier with tremendous force. The old man reacted instantly. The pearl in his hand shot into the air, spinning wildly as he spat a mist of refined spiritual energy onto it. Blue radiance unfurled from its surface, weaving itself into a massive net beneath the barrier. At the same time, he formed an intricate incantation gesture, causing spiritual light to swell around him until a huge sphere of blue light hovered protectively above his body. Han Li's giant sword crashed into the barrier, slicing it cleanly in half with a booming burst of wind. And, with a huge burst of wind, the light barrier was cleaved into two and the sword moved on to strike the huge net underneath it. The following scene was somewhat against Han Li's expectations. The huge blue net sparkled with light and held firm against the huge sword's descent. The translucent, sparkling lines of the net appeared incredibly durable. As the massive sword hacked down again and again, the net refused to break. Instead, its countless threads tightened, weaving together layer after layer until the giant blade was completely entangled. Though the restraint was loose, it was enough to hinder the sword and buy the old man precious time. Han Li frowned at this unexpected development. Before he could adjust his strategy, the old man abruptly made his move. The elder's expression darkened as he formed a strange wheel-shaped incantation gesture with his hands. Multicolored spell seals, each carrying a flicker of power, shot from his palms into the shrinking blue sphere of light overhead. As the sphere compressed further, the old man muttered a cryptic incantation, and with a sharp sound, the sphere shattered. Instantly, palm-wide ice crystals materialized out of thin air, sparkling with cold radiance. They filled the air within a 30-meter radius around the old man, creating a mesmerizing yet deadly field of glacial blades. With a sharp command, He thrust his hands toward Han Li, and the ice crystals burst forward in a howling torrent. Thousands of shimmering shards rushed across the sky like a blizzard of knives. Han Li could not help but wonder, is this a spirit technique? His surprise lasted only a moment. Acting swiftly, he activated the flower basket treasure and slapped the spirit beast pouch at his waist. A swarm of black-tinted gold-devouring beetles surged out, circling around him in a dense, shifting mass. Rather than forming a weapon or structure as they sometimes did, they simply rotated in place, knitting together an impenetrable protective sphere that concealed Han Li completely. The flower basket shot forward as a cloud of white mist and intercepted the first wave of ice crystals. Most of the icy blades vanished into its folds, absorbed with ease, but the remaining crystals swerved intelligently, slipping past the basket and converging on Han Li again as though they possessed a will of their own. They struck the beetle barrier in rapid succession, piercing inside before new beetles filled the gaps. Soon, the black insect sphere returned to its perfect shape, but no sound emerged from within, not even the slightest tremor. Old Man Emu's eyes widened in disbelief. His ice crystal technique was far stronger than an ordinary elemental ice rain spell. Each crystal was forged from the profound icy essence he had cultivated through centuries of practice. They were razor-sharp and carried chilling force potent enough to linger in the bodies of most cultivators, freezing their meridians and crippling their power. Yet here, every crystal had vanished without a trace, leaving no lingering cold. It was as though their power had been swallowed whole. As he hesitated, preparing to probe the beetle barrier with his spiritual sense, a sudden ringing boom erupted above him. His ears buzzed violently, his consciousness wavered, and he nearly fell from the sky. Alarmed, he slapped his body several times, activating protective layers of white light. Regaining his balance, he looked up. The enormous silver bell had silently drifted above him. It unleashed a sound attack again, but this time the attack was not directed at the old man. The vibrating silver waves crashed into the giant blue net that still entangled Han Li's sword. In moments, the once sturdy net tore apart strand by strand, scattering into fading motes of light. Freed at last, the azure sword slashed downward with unstoppable momentum. Before the blade could reach him, a massive wave of pressure met its path. The old man, pale and shaken, knew he could not endure a direct blow. He summoned a huge blue barrier, nearly 100 meters wide, and reinforced it by calling his magic treasure, the blue orb, to hover protectively overhead. After spitting a stream of pure essence onto it, he wrapped himself in yet another layer of light. But his attention soon shifted back to Han Li. His face turned ashen. The beetle barrier had dissolved into a drifting cloud above Han Li. In his hand, Han Li held several delicate azure ice flowers, each one glistening like carved crystal. His calm, indifferent gaze cut through the air like a blade. When their eyes met, the old man felt an involuntary shiver run down his spine. It was not the cold beauty of the flowers that unsettled him. It was the overwhelming icy power radiating from them, far more potent than his own profound icy essence. Even from a distance, he sensed a chilling force that made his heart tighten with dread. The aura felt strange, unfamiliar, and terrifying. "You broke my spirit technique, using that?" the old man muttered. His voice strained. "Could you tell me what that treasure is?" Han Li merely smiled. "The treasure? That can wait. If you explain your spirit technique to me, perhaps I will share something about it." The old man's expression darkened. "A cultivator like you showing interest in a spell warrior's spirit technique? How absurd." Yet despite his attempt at bravado, fear flickered in his eyes each time he glanced at the ice flowers. Han Li's faint sneer only deepened his anger. With a sharp snort, the old man slapped his storage pouch and summoned a pitch-black object that resembled a miniature mountain. Han Li's expression shifted to surprise. Before he could examine it, the old man began chanting, tossing the mountain into the air. Black radiance enveloped it as it expanded rapidly, from a tiny object to a massive structure over 100 meters wide. And still growing. Han Li felt a chill run through his chest. He immediately pointed toward his azure sword. In response, the blade transformed into a streak of azure light and slammed against the enormous black mountain. A thunderous explosion followed as stone fragments and light scattered in all directions. The sword managed to carve a 30-meter deep hole into the mountain's peak. But before Han Li could launch another strike, the mountain began repairing itself. Before his eyes, the gouge closed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Within moments, the damage was mostly gone. The mountain continued swelling until it towered over 300 meters tall. It now resembled a true mountain suspended in midair. Even Han Li, usually calm and composed, felt his face tighten. If that monstrous weight fell upon him, even his beetles and armor would be reduced to dust. His sword struck again and again, but the mountain remained virtually unscathed. The old man let out a sinister laugh and pointed. The mountain vanished with a rush of wind and appeared directly above Han Li. Dropping like a falling world, Han Li reacted instantly. Thunder roared behind him as silver light flashed. In one blink, he vanished from his location and reappeared 100 meters away. Silver-white wings spread behind him. Impossible, the old man gasped, shock flooding his expression. Realizing that Han Li possessed an instant movement ability, his heart sank. Without the power to restrain him, all his efforts would be wasted. He looked up at the massive black mountain, still floating ominously. At his current cultivation, he could only move it a handful of times. Each movement drained an enormous amount of his strength. After all, at his current cultivation he was only capable of moving the huge black mountain several times. Each use would greatly drain his magic power. He didn't dare to use it recklessly. With great alarm lingering within, the old man thought to retreat. Han Li, on the other hand, glanced at the black mountain with a trace of awe. He could immediately tell that such a terrifying treasure was far beyond the old man's own craftsmanship. Its presence felt ancient, carrying weight and power that did not belong to the current era. Han Li realized that if a strike from that black mountain were to land cleanly, even a late Nascent Soul cultivator would be unable to withstand it. A single blow from this treasure could decide any battle. And while that knowledge was intimidating, it also stirred a powerful greed within him. If he could obtain this treasure, it would compensate for his lack of overwhelming offensive force. Moreover, the old man's wind-riding chariot was something he had been eyeing as well. With these thoughts simmering in his mind, Han Li's gaze gradually darkened. His expression grew cold, and a thin but unmistakable killing intent surfaced in his eyes. Although he had not exchanged many moves with the old man, he had already seen most of his capabilities. The old man was clearly specialized in techniques derived from ice energy. To most cultivators, such methods would be frightening. But Han Li possessed the celestial ice flames, a power far superior to ordinary ice. The storm of ice crystals earlier, though numerous and sharp, had been entirely nullified by his flames. Even the Black Mountain, despite its tremendous weight and frightening strength, could not be used effectively against a target moving as swiftly as Han Li with his thunderstorm wings. Recognizing that the old man had exhausted nearly all worthwhile tricks, Han Li made his decision. He no longer hesitated. The ice flowers in his palm trembled, emitted a pulse of blue radiance, and then slowly merged into a small, egg-sized flame. The flame hovered above his hand, beautiful and strange, radiating a cold and profound aura that did not belong to mortal realms. At the same moment, Han Li raised his free hand and pointed toward his huge sword and silver bell. Both treasures erupted with radiance and streaked forward like twin comets. Han Li flapped his thunderstorm wings once, and thunder rippled through the air. In a flash of silver light, he vanished from where he stood, reappearing more than 300 meters closer to the old man. The small flower flame in his grasp floated obediently beside him, ready for use. The huge sword dissolved mid-flight into hundreds upon hundreds of sword lights, each nearly a meter long. They filled the sky, weaving a net of dazzling azure light around the old man. The silver bell unleashed one wave of sound after another, each shockwave rolling outward like invisible ripples trying to shatter the old man's layered barrier. The old man felt deep alarm, but he managed to maintain his composure. He poured a massive surge of spiritual power into the pearl floating above his head, strengthening the barrier surrounding him until it rippled with renewed force. At the same time, he formed a rapid series of complex hand gestures. Blue radiance burst from his body, peeling away from his skin in smooth sheets. These sheets rotated and condensed in the air, forming 4 exquisitely refined ice shields about a meter long. They hovered around him like guardians, turning in a defensive orbit. With these shields in place and the mountain beginning to respond to his summons, he briefly regained confidence. The enormous black peak, still radiating an ominous light from the distance, slowly began to fly toward him. Answering his gesture, the old man nervously scanned his surroundings, expecting Han Li to suddenly strike. After all, Han Li had displayed astonishing speed earlier. His wariness was justified. He was a battle-hardened spell warrior with vast experience. Then, in a burst of silver thunder, Han Li appeared only 40 meters away. Before the old man could react, a storm of razor-thin azure threads shot out from Han Li's hand. A manifestation of the Night Azure Needle's treasure talisman he had once been gifted. At such a short range, the old man had no time to mount a proper defense. Countless threads pierced through the outer blue barrier and crashed directly into the spinning ice shields. A chorus of cracking and shattering rang out. The pristine white shields erupted into light as the threads were encased in thick layers of ice and fell uselessly toward the ground. Seeing this, the old man's fear melted into sudden joy. The destruction of Han Li's needles meant his defense had held. He opened his mouth and released a stream of pure blue radiance that shot directly at Han Li. But the moment the light left his lips, Han Li vanished again. All that remained was a silver flash and the sharp crackle of thunder fading behind him. This brief distraction was enough. The Black Mountain finally arrived overhead, towering and oppressive. It blotted out the sky like a piece of the heavens themselves had fallen. Without hesitation, the old man slapped a spell seal against it. The mountain trembled, unleashed a surge of black radiance, and its shadow expanded outward, enveloping the hundreds of sword lights and the gigantic silver bell. The treasures struggled inside the radiance, shaking violently, but the suppressive force weakened them drastically. Freed from immediate danger, the old man felt waves of relief washing over him. Without wasting time, he turned his hand and retrieved the wind-riding chariot. A single toss brought it back to full size. It hovered beside him like a loyal steed, waiting for him to board. The dread he had felt ever since seeing the small blue flames in Han Li's palm had only grown stronger. Combined with the overwhelming speed of the thunderstorm wings, the old man knew things were spiraling out of his control. Fighting to the death was no longer an option. Escape was the only sensible choice. With a flash, he transformed into a streak of light, shooting toward the chariot. In a blink, he slipped past the obstructed flying swords and arrived beside the chariot. The next moment, he was already inside its protective shell. Relief and fear battled inside him as he prepared to summon back his Black Mountain and the Pearl. But then, thunder rang to his left. Han Li materialized beside him like a ghost stepping out of lightning. "Ah!" the old man cried out, raising his arm in panic. But it was too late. Han Li's hand was already shooting forward like a lightning bolt. The celestial ice flames wrapped tightly around his palm. The floating ice shields responded automatically, springing between Han Li and their master in a desperate attempt to guard him. The old man felt hope surge inside him. If Han Li dared to strike the crystal ice shields with his bare hand, then the frigid energy within them would freeze his arm solid. It would be a swift and foolish death. A muffled thud erupted. A flash of white light mixed with deep blue flared outward. In the next heartbeat, the old man's hope died. Han Li's flame-wrapped hand did not freeze. It punched cleanly through the ice shields as if they were made of fragile glass. The cold flames swallowed them, melted them, and then pressed firmly against the old man's chest. His body felt strangely soft beneath Han Li's palm, like it had already begun to lose its integrity. Before the old man could even scream, the celestial ice flames spread across him like a tide. Within a single breath, most of his body transformed into gleaming ice. Terror twisted his expression as he desperately summoned the Koryong flames he had spent centuries cultivating. A ribbon of pure, blinding white fire surged from within him, wrapping around his head and neck to halt the spread of the blue frost. For a brief moment, the two forces clashed violently, locked in a perfect stalemate. Han Li watched this without emotion, then flicked his free hand. A thin streak of azure sword energy sliced through the air. It cut directly at the old man's head with ruthless efficiency. The white core flames shuddered, weakening for a heartbeat. That single moment was enough. The icy blue frost surged upward and swallowed the remaining part of the old man's head entirely. The frozen half of his face still showed despair twisted into hostility. A sharp crack sounded above his head as his nascent soul emerged, bearing the old man's likeness, its tiny face contorted in hatred. Han Li did not hesitate. He spat a bolt of silver lightning toward it, but the nascent soul vanished in an instant, swallowed by a flash of piercing blue radiance. The lightning missed completely. Han Li scanned the surroundings and found the nascent soul already hundreds of meters away. It flickered once more, using instant movement again. A heartbeat later, the blue pearl that had been controlling the old man's barrier vanished from the battlefield and reappeared in the nascent soul's grasp. The tiny figure glared back at Han Li with deep resentment, then blurred again. Fleeing at full speed, it abandoned instant movement and instead transformed into a streak of light so thin it seemed like a line drawn across the sky. Within seconds, it vanished beyond the horizon. Han Li followed it with a cold expression, made no move to chase, and instead turned his attention back to the old man's body. His thunderstorm wings could also teleport, but the pause required between each movement made him too slow to reliably catch a fleeing nascent soul. Since the old man had escaped the killing strike, pursuing him now would only waste precious energy. Holding the frozen corpse, Han Li's expression did not change. With a small wave of his hand, the body shattered into countless glittering fragments, scattering into the air like blue crystal dust. At that moment, the old man's nascent soul had already disappeared without a trace. Han Li expressionlessly shook his hand and caused the old man's frozen corpse to shatter, filling the sky with glossy blue dust. Although he hadn't dealt with the opponent's nascent soul, the old man's body was destroyed. It would take decades for him to recover his vitality, let alone find another body to possess. Even if he were forced to inhabit a weak corpse, his cultivation would fall drastically. Han Li, however, had no reason to worry. The battle was over, and the outcome was clearly in his favor. As he surveyed the battlefield, his eyes fell upon the remnants left behind, 2 ancient treasures and a silver storage pouch. A faint glint appeared in his eyes. Even if he never found Master Cang Kun's cave residence, this dangerous expedition into the Moulan Plains had still proven profitable. Reaching out calmly, Han Li summoned the storage pouch into his hand. He infused it with his spiritual sense, probing its contents, but his anticipation quickly turned to disappointment. Inside were only a dozen mid-grade spirit stones, a few common refinement materials, and several bottles of low-quality medicine pills. When he examined the pills, his suspicion was confirmed. They were ordinary, nothing of real value. Han Li sighed softly. It seemed that the Moulan Plains truly lacked cultivation resources. Even a nascent soul spell warrior carried such poor items. What puzzled him more was the absence of jade slips. He had hoped to find spirit techniques or rare methods that could enhance his power quickly. But there was nothing. Setting aside the pouch, Han Li turned his gaze toward the massive black mountain floating in the air, the opponent's ancient treasure, still glowing faintly with black light. Though its master had already fled as a nascent soul remnant, the treasure itself remained suspended in the air, masterless. Narrowing his eyes, Han Li extended his hand and beckoned lightly. In response, the enormous mountain shuddered, then rapidly shrank in size as black light rippled across its surface. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a miniature mountain and shot straight into his grasp. He examined the small object curiously. It wasn't heavy at all, yet the aura it emitted was powerful. On the underside, he noticed 3 faint golden characters engraved into the base, Thousand-Layer Mountain. A satisfied smile touched his lips. Han Li murmured its name under his breath, pleased by the find, before storing it away carefully. He then retrieved the wind-riding chariot as well, storing it into his spatial pouch. His eyes shifted in the direction where the old man's nascent soul had fled. After a brief moment of contemplation, he decided against pursuit and turned to fly in another direction. Moments later, the sky was empty, Han Li had vanished without a trace. Ellipsis. Far away, among a cluster of quiet hills covered with tall, straw-like grass, the area appeared deserted, but soon, an azure streak of light flashed across the distant horizon. Within moments, the streak descended above one of the hills, its glow dimming to reveal Han Li. He scanned the area below with a frown. After a moment's thought, he flicked his sleeve. Several azure streaks of light shot downward like falling stars. Striking the hill, a ripple of light spread through the air, revealing a faint white barrier. Beneath it, 4 cultivators were waiting, smiling calmly. Marquis Nanlong, a white-haired old man, an elderly woman, and a tan-skinned man. Marquis Nanlong twirled his beard and laughed heartily. "It is truly fortunate for fellow Taoist Han to have arrived safely," he said, waving his hand to dissolve the barrier. Han Li descended lightly, smiling in return. "Oh, it seems the others haven't arrived yet?" The tan-skinned man shook his head. "We fear the others may have run into trouble. When we fled separately, fellow Taoist Long and fellow Taoist Wang were both pursued by spell warriors. Escaping them is no easy task." Marquis Nanlong chuckled. "Even so, I was most concerned about you, Brother Han. That wind-riding chariot chasing after you was no ordinary treasure. Yet, you managed to shake it off with ease. Truly impressive. It seems I've underestimated you." Han Li gave a faint smile, concealing his amusement. "It was nothing. I merely have some confidence in my movement techniques." Seeing that Han Li didn't intend to elaborate, Marquis Nanlong smoothly changed the topic. The group soon began discussing the looming war between the Nine Nations Union and the Moulan tribes, a conflict that would soon engulf the entire heavenly south. The old woman spoke softly. "This coming war will surely last for years. The last war between our two sides continued for over a decade. The Devil Dao, the Righteous Dao, and even your Heavenly Dao alliance, Brother Han, will all be drawn into it." Marquis Nanlong nodded with a knowing smile. "Indeed, the Drifting Cloud sect, being part of the Heavenly Dao alliance, will have to send its Nascent Soul elders to the battlefield. Perhaps, fellow Taoist Han, you'll find yourself back on the Moulan Plains sooner than expected." The tan-skinned man frowned thoughtfully. "Still, I don't understand why the Moulan are attacking now. They know our powers have united. Even with all their tribes combined, victory seems unlikely, unless they've received reinforcements again, like in the last war?" The old woman nodded. "That may be so, but even then, their aggression is strange. Something must have changed among their tribes." Their conversation deepened, drifting between speculation and strategy. Time passed unnoticed as the cultivators spoke beneath the fading light of the plains. Suddenly, Marquis Nanlong paused mid-sentence, his gaze snapping upward. The others followed instinctively, their expressions growing tense. In the Moulan Plains, any approaching light could mean danger. From the horizon, several lights streaked toward them, one black and two crimson. After a moment of observation, Marquis Nanlong's expression relaxed. "It's nothing," he said with a smile. "That should be fellow Taoist Wang and his 2 juniors." Relief spread among the group. The black and crimson lights approached rapidly, and soon 3 figures descended: Wang Tiangu, his disciple Wang Chan, and Yan Ruyan. Seeing Han Li among the group, Wang Tiangu blinked in mild surprise. "Yi, fellow Taoist Han arrived before us. How unexpected." Han Li's gaze swept toward him and his 2 juniors. His voice was calm but carried a subtle undertone. It was merely a stroke of luck, but to escape unscathed while protecting 2 juniors. "Fellow Taoist Wang, that's truly admirable." Wang Tiangu smiled faintly. "Hee, the spell warrior who pursued me was rather slow. The 3 of us used one of our sect's escape arts to easily shake him off. It's hardly comparable to escaping the wind-riding chariot." Han Li only gave a thin smile, hiding the sneer that flashed in his heart. Before he could say more, something in the distance caught his attention. His expression changed slightly. Marquis Nanlong suddenly raised his head again, and his face brightened. "Yi, it's fellow Taoist Long. Excellent. It seems everyone has made it out alive after all. We can finally proceed to our destination together." I was just worrying that we wouldn't be able to break the formation if we were missing anyone." The others were visibly pleased. After all, if even one of their members had fallen, their chances of success would drop sharply. But before their relief could settle, the white-haired old man spoke in a grave tone. "Not good. Fellow Taoist Long is injured, and he's being pursued." The entire group looked up in alarm. In the distant sky, a green streak of light was fleeing frantically, followed closely by a red beam, the enemy in hot pursuit. Within seconds, they were almost upon the hill where Han Li and the others stood. Marquis Nanlong's expression quickly turned sullen. "It seems fellow Taoist Long has encountered some trouble. 2 spell warriors are chasing after him. Everyone, set out." With that commanding shout, Marquis Nanlong launched himself into the sky, his body radiating a golden light so bright that it seemed to set the clouds aglow. The others quickly followed, exchanging quick glances before soaring upward, 8 streaks of colored light streaking across the hills as they hastened toward the beleaguered cultivator. The wind tore past them, carrying dust and leaves as they accelerated, urgency etched into every movement. Suddenly, a white streak of light surged forward at tremendous speed, arriving before them and fading to reveal the stern-faced cultivator they sought. His face was pale, drawn, and his aura flickering slightly, evidence of the long, grueling pursuit. He saluted the party with both relief and gratitude, his earlier anxiety replaced by a flicker of hope. Marquis Nanlong's voice, filled with concern, called out, "Are you all right? How did you end up pursued by 2 spell warriors? I thought only one was chasing you." The stern-faced cultivator managed a bitter, helpless smile. "I am fine, but after being chased for most of a day. Another spell warrior joined the pursuit. I spent 2 whole days trying to evade them. My vitality is nearly spent." The old woman beside them let out a knowing sigh. "No wonder you fled here," she said softly. "Apart from fellow Taoist Nanlong and fellow Taoist Yun, no one else would have been able to escape 2 early Nascent Soul stage spell warriors." Han Li's gaze swept across the distant figures of the 2 spell warriors, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Despite their formidable aura, they lingered, seemingly unconcerned about the potential retaliation. One of them, golden-skinned with a feathered crown atop his head and simple hemp robes, exuded a calm, proud energy. The other, clothed in green and emanating a sinister aura, maintained a watchful, calculating gaze. Both were early Nascent Soul cultivators, and their presence radiated tension. Yet they hesitated instead of fleeing outright. Marquis Nanlong's patience snapped. He let out a cold, furious shout. "You 2 fellow Taoists still linger? Do you truly wish for us to take action? Be warned, overstep, and you will meet your end here." The hemp-robed spell warrior laughed mockingly, his tone dripping with scorn. "Arrogance, it suits you well. We are not your equals." "That is true, but your power cannot kill us. Our task is simple. Delay you for half a day. Do you truly believe you can leave freely? Sit obediently, and perhaps your souls may be allowed to reincarnate." The green-robed spell warrior's voice was calm, almost ceremonial. "As masters of the Moulan Plains, it is our duty to properly entertain our guests," he said, exuding detached confidence. Marquis Nanlong's expression darkened, his body blazed with golden light as he bellowed. "Delay us for half a day? You dare overreach? Then so be it." He turned to Yun, signaling that they would strike. The white-robed old man, however, sighed, revealing a trace of reluctance. "I had hoped to conserve our magic power for future matters. But we cannot allow these 2 to constantly harass us. We have no choice but to act." With that, he spat out a silver dharmic wheel, fist-sized at first, which gleamed and expanded to over a meter in length. The spell warriors instinctively stepped back, caution radiating from their bodies. Marquis Nanlong silently swept his sleeve, launching a golden flying sword. Han Li and the others summoned their spiritual energy, drifting forward with a calm, measured force, ready to confront the persistent threat. Just as tension peaked, a streak of fiery red light suddenly appeared on the horizon, moving straight toward the spell warriors. The group instinctively paused, recognizing the approach of a sound transmission talisman. The hemp-robed warrior caught the flaming object deftly, holding it in the center of his palm as it ignited. His eyes widened in shock, immediately scanning its contents with spiritual sense. He hastily relayed the message to the green-robed warrior. Both spell warriors' expressions changed from arrogance to alarm as they scrutinized the group, finally settling on Han Li. A heaviness replaced their previous confidence. Han Li remained composed, understanding instantly that this disturbance likely stemmed from the fatal injury he had inflicted on an elder, whose nascent soul had barely escaped. Their response was personal. After a brief, intense exchange between the two, they hesitated, casting one last grave look at Han Li. Then, in two brilliant flashes, they vanished from sight, retreating silently. The group watched, a mixture of surprise and relief washing over them. Wang Tiangu smiled, teasing Han Li with a question about the spell warriors. But Han Li responded with absolute clarity that he had never seen them before and had no connection to them. Marquis Nanlong, frowning slightly, chose not to delve further. The matter was put aside, and the party pressed on with their mission, eager to claim the treasures of the Moulan Plains. They moved quickly, guided by Nanlong along the western border of the plains, until they reached a barren, ashen gray mountain. The mountain, several hundred meters tall, was unremarkable and devoid of vegetation. Spiritual qi was sparse here, and without guidance, it would have been easily overlooked. Yet this was Master Cang Kun's cave residence. At the mountain's center, Nanlong and Yun prepared to lift the outer layer of restrictions. Each produced a small flag, one glowing green and the other yellow with faint talismanic inscriptions. The flags shimmered with light, quivering as if eager to be released. The group watched intently as the two flags were launched into the earth simultaneously, vanishing from sight. A tense silence followed. Doubt flickered across the faces of the group as nothing seemed to happen. Then, gradually, the earth began to tremble. The ground shook violently, sending small rocks skittering in all directions. Most of the party struggled to maintain their balance. Han Li's heart quickened, sensing the enormity of what was about to occur. However, the following scene left Han Li startled. As the ground fiercely trembled, a fine crack spread from the top of the mountain down the base of the mountain. A dazzling white light shone from within the crack, splitting the entire mountain as if it were being torn apart by some divine force. Han Li and the group watched in stunned silence. The sheer power displayed by Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man, fellow Taoist Yun, filled everyone with awe. Even though they appeared calm on the surface, their hearts were shaken. Behind the crowd, Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan, the two with the lowest cultivation, stood quietly behind Wang Tiangu. Han Li's cold gaze swept over them. He had long intended to kill Wang Chan, but now was clearly not the time. The treasure hidden within this mountain took priority. Moments later, as the mountain split open completely, a massive crevice appeared, more than 30 meters wide. From within, they saw a limestone stairway descending deep into the earth. The white-clothed old man's eyes sparkled with excitement as he said, "Let's go," and led the way forward. Marquis Nanlong, however, stayed behind, smiling faintly as he guarded the rear. Han Li quietly noted this detail. If someone of Marquis Nanlong's caliber chose to guard the back, then the old man surnamed Yun must be far from ordinary. The others also noticed but remained silent, each understanding that in a gathering of high-level cultivators, it was often wiser not to speak unnecessarily. The group began their descent. White moonstones embedded in the walls illuminated their path, but as they moved deeper, the air grew colder. After traveling several hundred meters down, the soft white glow of the stones gradually shifted to an eerie green hue, casting ghostly light across the narrow passage. Han Li frowned. Something felt off. He instinctively widened the distance between himself and the tan-robed cultivator ahead, enough space to react if danger appeared. The others had the same idea. Apart from Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man, each cultivator kept a safe 30-meter gap between one another. Eventually, after what felt like the time it took to finish a meal, they emerged into a vast underground hall. The sight before them was breathtaking. The chamber seemed to be carved entirely from a single, enormous piece of jade. Its surface emitted a faint, translucent blue glow, cold and mysterious. But when Han Li extended his spiritual sense, it was immediately repelled. The same happened when he tested other directions. This was no ordinary jade. It was some kind of spiritual material that blocked divine sense. The others discovered the same thing, and the hall soon filled with cautious silence. Wang Tianggu and the other cultivators frowned, realizing that this place might indeed be the rumored location of the wondrous soul restriction. Just as Han Li was deep in thought, the ground suddenly shook again. A loud rumbling came from behind them. When they turned around, their hearts sank. The stairway they had descended had vanished, replaced by a seamless wall of glowing blue light. Fellow Taoist Nanlong, what is the meaning of this? The tan-robed cultivator demanded, his voice heavy with suspicion. Everyone's attention turned sharply toward Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man. Yet Marquis Nanlong remained perfectly calm. There's no need for alarm, he said evenly. This is just the mountain's restriction resetting itself. It will open again after 3 days. The same thing happened last time we came here. It's simply part of the formation's natural defense. On the bright side, with the mountain sealed, we won't need to worry about spell warriors discovering us. Though a few still looked doubtful, his explanation eased the tension. After all, with both Marquis Nanlong and fellow Taoist Yun here, none of them believed it was a trap. The tan-robed cultivator gave a respectful nod. So that's how it is. I was being overly cautious. Marquis Nanlong smiled lightly. No harm done. Now, let's begin. This wondrous soul formation is not easily broken. Fellow Taoist Yun and I failed last time. Let's hope this attempt will fare better. The wrinkled old woman in the group gave a sly smile. Perhaps I can help. I once obtained a treasure that excels at breaking restrictions and barriers. It might spare us some effort. The white-clothed old man's expression brightened immediately. Oh, if Lady Tai truly possesses such a treasure, then by all means, please try. Our spiritual sense method isn't guaranteed to work anyway. Marquis Nanlong nodded approvingly. Indeed, please, fellow Taoist Tai, show us. The old woman chuckled, but her tone turned shrewd. Since you've both agreed, I'll be direct. If my treasure succeeds, will I be allowed to choose one item first, along with the two of you? Her words caused a stir. Several cultivators frowned, clearly unhappy with her request. But Marquis Nanlong, after a brief pause, said, very well. Anyone who successfully breaks the formation shall have priority in choosing a treasure. Right after S2, does anyone object? No one dared to speak up. Han Li and Wang Tianggu remained indifferent, but the others clearly weren't pleased. Still, they held their tongues. Marquis Nanlong smiled faintly. Since there are no objections, please begin. Lady Tai's eyes glimmered with satisfaction. She had great confidence in her treasure, enough to risk irritating the rest of the group. From her sleeve, she drew out a small object only a few inches long. It was narrow at the tip and thicker at the base, glowing faintly red like molten metal, a spike-shaped artifact. Without hesitation, she spat a mist of spiritual light onto the spike. It immediately responded, radiating intense heat that swept across the hall. Even Marquis Nanlong and the old man surnamed Yun stepped back a few paces in surprise. Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan instinctively summoned protective barriers of crimson light. Their faces pale as the heat scorched their skin. Despite being late core formation cultivators, the temperature was nearly unbearable. The spike began to emit faint cracking sounds, and to everyone's astonishment, tiny arcs of white lightning flickered across its surface. Flames and lightning intertwined, burning fiercely yet flashing with electric brilliance. Han Li's eyes narrowed. A treasure of both lightning and fire attributes, that was extremely rare. The other cultivators looked on in awe and jealousy, realizing just how powerful this ancient artifact was. Ignoring their reactions, Lady Tai focused her gaze on the glowing blue wall ahead. With a firm motion, she raised her hand and sent the lightning fire spike shooting forward. A fiery explosion erupted as the spike pierced into the barrier. Deafening booms echoed throughout the hall. The spike began to whirl rapidly above her head, its light blurring into a streak of red and white. Its speed increased until it was nearly invisible, like a storm of flame and lightning tearing through the air. The entire chamber trembled under its power. The cultivators could only watch in astonishment. Han Li, in particular, felt a deep sense of alarm. Never before had he witnessed such a fast and fierce ancient treasure. Even a nascent soul cultivator would struggle to defend against such a weapon. If he were ever forced to face it, he knew there was only one way he might survive, by relying on his thunderstorm wings. The old woman pointed at the faint blur of light in the air and solemnly shouted, "Go!" Suddenly, red and white light flickered, and the lightning fire spike fiercely struck the blue crystal wall in front of her. A thunderous boom filled the air as lightning and flames erupted, wrapping the entire wall in a blinding flash. Han Li's pupils contracted as he observed from the side. Even though the light was overwhelming, he could sense the powerful fluctuations of spiritual qi from the strike. It was no wonder Lady Tai had been so confident in her treasure. The lightning fire spike truly possessed great destructive power. But as the blinding radiance faded, Han Li's calm voice echoed in his mind, "Such power still won't be enough against the wondrous soul restriction." When the smoke cleared, the result confirmed his suspicion. The crystal wall stood completely unharmed, its surface smooth and flawless, as if it had never been touched. The spike floated weakly in front of it, its energy exhausted. Marquis Nanlong let out a faint chuckle, masking his disappointment. While the might of this magic treasure is quite powerful, it still lacks the strength to break through the wondrous soul restriction. Thank you for your effort, fellow Taoist Tai. Does anyone else wish to make an attempt? But the old woman wasn't ready to give up. Who said that was its full power? That was merely a probing strike. Her voice was sharp, filled with determination. Marquis Nanlong's eyes brightened. "Oh, then please, fellow Taoist, do continue." The old woman clasped her hands together, forming a complex incantation gesture. The lightning fire spike slowly floated back above her head, humming softly. As she chanted, the spike began to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster. Lightning and fire intertwined, fusing together in a dazzling dance of power until strange scarlet lightning began to arc across its surface. The others watched in awe. Even Han Li felt his heart stir. There was something peculiar about that fusion of lightning and flame. He could faintly sense the shift in its essence, as if the old woman had unlocked a deeper layer of the weapon's potential. Then, with a low mutter of "break," the old woman sent the weapon forward once again. The spike vanished in a blur of scarlet light, cutting through the air with a shrill whistle before slamming into the crystal wall. This time, there was no explosion. Instead, it made a subtle pop, and began to drill into the barrier itself, its lightning-sheathed tip spinning furiously. The cultivator's eyes widened in amazement. Inch by inch, the spike burrowed into the solid wall, leaving behind a faint tunnel of molten blue. Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man exchanged glances of excitement. Perhaps it was working after all. However, Han Li only watched with a faint, knowing smile. To him, the result was already clear. Then, just as the lightning fire spike had drilled about a foot deep, the crystal wall suddenly shuddered. A brilliant blue radiance surged from within, and countless thin threads of white light burst out, wrapping tightly around the spike. In an instant, the scarlet lightning was overwhelmed, consumed by the radiant strands. A deep rumble echoed through the hall, followed by a violent explosion. The lightning fire spike shattered into fragments of light that quickly faded away. When the brilliance subsided, the crystal wall had completely restored itself, unscathed once more. The old woman's face turned pale. Her body trembled with shock and fury. That weapon had been an ancient treasure, something she had spent decades refining and nurturing. To see it destroyed so effortlessly made her chest burn with grief and anger. The others stared in stunned silence. Even Marquis Nanlong, who had seen countless things in his lifetime, could only sigh heavily. Yan Ruyan, standing quietly to the side, glanced at Han Li, her eyes full of wonder. She had noticed the calm smile he wore, the faint amusement at the corner of his lips, as if he had foreseen this outcome all along. After a moment of silence, the old woman steadied herself. She forced out a bitter smile and said, "It seems I've made quite a fool of myself. The wondrous soul restriction truly deserves its reputation as one of the top 10 ancient formations. I can do nothing more. Perhaps one of you may have better luck. With that, she took several steps back, her voice filled with resignation. Marquis Nanlong nodded solemnly. A pity indeed. The power of this restriction is greater than expected. Does any other fellow Taoist wish to try? His gaze subtly shifted toward Wang Tiangu, the Grand Master of spell formations. But no one moved. The destruction of the lightning fire spike had extinguished any enthusiasm they might have had. Who would dare to risk their own treasures now? Even Wang Tiangu, though famed for his knowledge of formations, remained silent. He had studied many ancient barriers, but nothing that could compare to one of the 10 great restrictions. Attempting to unravel it here would only invite embarrassment. Then, just as the hall fell into uneasy quiet, a calm voice broke the silence. As untalented as I am, Han Li said lightly, I would like to make an attempt. How about it? Everyone turned toward him in surprise. Even Marquis Nanlong blinked, slightly taken aback, before quickly nodding. Of course, fellow Taoist Han, please, go ahead. Han Li stepped forward, his expression composed. He approached a section of the wall that hadn't been struck before. From behind, Wang Chan sneered quietly and whispered something to Yan Ruyan. But she didn't respond. Wang Tiangu, on the other hand, kept his composure, though his eyes reflected deep curiosity. Standing before the crystal wall, Han Li didn't act immediately. He raised his hand, spiritual power flowing through his body, and extended a single finger. A thin streak of azure light condensed at his fingertip and swept across the surface of the wall, leaving no mark whatsoever. Han Li didn't seem disappointed. He simply placed his entire palm on the wall, letting his spiritual qi flow outward. His hand glowed faintly with blue light as he stood still, sensing, analyzing, quietly probing the restriction's structure. The others watched in silence, unsure of what he was doing, but Han Li's concentration never wavered. Unbeknownst to them, his eyes had begun to gleam faintly with blue light, the mark of his spirit eyes technique. Through it, he could see beyond the surface, tracing the intricate web of spiritual threads that made up the wondrous soul restriction. Time passed. A quarter of an hour slipped by, yet no one dared to disturb him. Finally, Han Li sighed softly and withdrew his hand. The blue glow faded from his eyes. Then, without hesitation, he reached into his storage pouch and retrieved a bundle of formation flags, over 10 of them, each glowing with a different hue. The white-clothed old man's eyes lit up. Ah, so fellow Taoist Han is also versed in the art of spell formations. Could it be you plan to break a formation with a formation? Do you actually understand the mysteries of the wondrous soul restriction? Han Li smiled faintly. Understand? Hardly. I've only studied a few formations of similar nature. I simply want to give it a try. He breathed out a gentle stream of azure qi, imbuing the flags with spiritual power. They shone brightly and lifted into the air. Under Han Li's command, they flew out from his hand and pointed their tips toward the crystal wall. Hovering in perfect formation, silent, still, and ready for what was to come, Han Li formed an incantation gesture with his hands, and the dozen formation flags began to hover and arrange themselves in a strange pattern facing the crystal wall. The formation's structure was so complex that even the seasoned cultivators present couldn't fully comprehend it. As Han Li softly chanted an incantation, a series of glowing seals shot from his fingertips, each one striking a flag precisely. The flags trembled, then began to shine with lights of various colors. Thin threads of spiritual light shot out, intertwining with one another, forming a mysterious network of energy before the wall. Among the onlookers, Wang Tiangu and several cultivators who were versed in formation arts frowned slightly. The formation looked oddly familiar, yet none of them could identify it. They could only observe silently, trying to decipher its mystery. Sensing their curiosity, Han Li suddenly gave a soft shout. The entire formation erupted in dazzling white light, forcing everyone to avert their gaze. When they refocused their eyes, now reinforced with spiritual energy, they were stunned to see that the flags were no longer floating. Instead, each one had merged seamlessly into the crystal wall, as though they had sprouted from it. A murmur of astonishment swept through the group. Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man exchanged pleased glances, their confidence in Han Li's abilities clearly growing. Wang Tiangu's face darkened for just an instant, while his disciple Wang Chan watched in awe. Even Yan Ruyan couldn't hide her curiosity as she studied the strange sight. Han Li then calmly approached the wall. Azure light flickered around his fingers as he pressed his palms against the smooth surface. The formation reacted immediately. The center began to pulse with radiant rainbow light that quickly spread outward, bathing the entire wall in a mesmerizing glow. The cultivators were momentarily spellbound by the sight. Then, without warning, Han Li pulled his hands back and his figure blurred, reappearing by another wall. He examined it briefly, then brought out another set of formation flags. These were arranged differently from the first, but the method was the same. After a series of hand seals, the flags embedded themselves into the wall, shining brightly before vanishing within. This time, the cultivators had shielded their eyes with spiritual power, allowing them to clearly witness how effortlessly Han Li drove the flags into the solid crystal walls. They couldn't help but exchange glances of admiration, and even a little unease. One by one, Han Li placed similar formations on each of the 4 walls. The process took nearly an hour, but none of the other cultivators grew impatient. They all understood that dissolving such an ancient and profound restriction required extreme care and precision. When the final formation was complete, Han Li stepped to the center of the hall and produced a green formation plate. As his fingers danced through a flurry of intricate hand seals, both the plate and the 4 walls began to pulse in rhythmic flashes of multicolored light. The air trembled with spiritual energy. Without lifting his head, Han Li spoke a single word, "Break." In that instant, the light flared violently and an ear-piercing screech filled the chamber, like the cries of countless birds echoing at once. The sound grew louder and louder until the entire hall trembled. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. When the cultivators regained their sight, they were shocked. The crystal walls had completely disappeared. In their place were ordinary stone walls, and on one side stood an enormous stone gate, towering 20 meters high and 12 meters wide. Marquis Nanlong's face broke into a delighted smile. "Marvelous. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Han to be so accomplished in formations." He laughed. "Once we each take our share, you shall have first pick." As promised. The white-clothed old man nodded in approval, eyes gleaming with excitement. Even the normally calm cultivators felt their anticipation rise. The tan-skinned cultivator could hardly contain himself. "Brother Nanlong, let's see what's inside. Surely there aren't more restrictions." Marquis Nanlong chuckled confidently. "No need to worry. According to Master Cang Kun's records, there should only be 2 layers of restrictions guarding his cave." With a wave of his sleeve, the massive stone gate rumbled open. The group stepped forward, but as soon as they passed through, the old woman among them suddenly gasped. "What in the heavens is this?" Before their eyes stretched a grand hall, several times larger than the one they had just left. At its center stood a magnificent pavilion of translucent white jade, rising more than 30 meters tall. It was elegant and refined, with 2 stories and a great arching doorway 10 meters high. Above it, engraved in silver characters, were the words Jadepier Pavilion. The sight was strange and mesmerizing. Before the pavilion stood a black altar table, and resting upon it was a single item, a glittering scroll, about a meter long, exuding faint spiritual light. Aside from the altar and pavilion, the entire hall was empty. The cultivators immediately assumed that whatever treasure Cang Kun had left behind must be hidden within the pavilion. Marquis Nanlong and the white-clothed old man exchanged a look. Then the old man cautiously approached the altar. The others remained alert but did not intervene, simply watching closely. After a moment's hesitation, the old man exhaled a mist of white spiritual light. It surrounded the scroll and gently lifted it from the altar. With a few graceful turns, the scroll unrolled, revealing a portrait of a scholar holding a sword, gazing solemnly toward the heavens. The stern-faced cultivator furrowed his brow. Could that be Master Cang Kun himself? Wang Tiangu nodded slightly. "It appears so, but there must be some deeper meaning to its placement here." The portrait alone doesn't seem particularly valuable. The white-clothed old man pondered, then decided to test it. He formed several red seals and flicked them toward the portrait. The image briefly shone with silver light, then went still, as though nothing had happened. How strange, the old man muttered. Perhaps it truly is just an ordinary painting. Marquis Nanlong shrugged lightly. If that's the case, let's store it for now. We can examine it later. For the moment, let's focus on finding the rest of the treasures. The old woman chuckled. Agreed, no objections here. The others nodded as well. Carefully, the white-clothed old man rolled up the scroll and placed it into his storage pouch. Marquis Nanlong then turned his eager gaze toward the pavilion. Come, he said, his voice filled with excitement. Let's see what's inside. The group circled around the altar and gathered before the jade pavilion's closed gates. With a push, Marquis Nanlong swung them open, and an explosion of blinding light flooded out, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the brilliance finally subsided, they blinked in astonishment. Inside the pavilion, 3 tall black wood shelves stood neatly arranged, each one lined with treasures that shimmered with dazzling light. The cultivators' hearts pounded with excitement, but years of experience kept them from acting rashly. Suppressing their greed, they slowly stepped forward together, eyes glinting with anticipation. With the party restraining their fervent desires, they slowly walked into the pavilion and examined each of the treasures on the shelves. The 3 shelves of treasures were placed in rows at the center of the first floor. They were clearly seen by everyone. The first row displayed 16 brilliant ancient and magic treasures, each one radiating a subtle but formidable aura, hinting at their immense power. The second row contained rare materials in all shapes and sizes, from fist-sized chunks of iron to blood-red crystals, each promising great potential for cultivation or refinement. The third row, by contrast, held only several small bottles, each no larger than an inch, containing mysterious medicine pills whose potency was unknown to most. Han Li walked past the treasures with an expressionless face, his eyes calm and calculating. Though the others also tried to maintain composure, none dared to touch the treasures outright. Their gazes roamed over the rows, assessing the item's value and potential, knowing that soon the treasures would be divided among them. After a brief moment, Marquis Nanlong stepped forward, inspecting the treasures on behalf of the group. The rest of the cultivators began discussing the items amicably, commenting on their origins and possible uses, though their true thoughts remained hidden behind polite smiles. Han Li's gaze drifted around the room. Aside from the shelves of treasures, he noticed a praying mat placed neatly on the floor and a small, emerald green plant sitting by the window. His curiosity stirred. Just as he thought to approach them, the white-clothed old man appeared before the praying mat in an instant, snatching it up effortlessly to examine it. Han Li instead turned to the small plant. As he examined it closely, a sweet voice spoke from behind him. Is Senior Han interested in this yin-focus herb? It is rare, but an optimal ingredient for refining yin-type medicine pills, capable of increasing their potency without drawbacks. Han Li slowly turned and saw Yan Ruyan standing there, her eyes bright with anticipation. He responded calmly. The yin-focus herb is different from ordinary herbs. Its medicinal properties peak at 100 years of age. Now that it has reached such an age, it no longer has practical use. His gaze shifted across the room, noting Wang Chan trailing after Wang Tiangu, whispering excitedly with his second uncle, completely ignoring Yan Ruyan. Yan Ruyan's smile did not falter. I didn't expect Senior Han to be skilled not only in spell formations but also in medicine pill refinement. Truly admirable. Her eagerness made Han Li wary, and he replied bluntly, only to a minor degree. But fellow Taoist Yan, do you not fear angering your husband by speaking to me? Her smile faded, replaced by a tone of helplessness. I am aware, but I still hope, in vain though it may be, to dissolve the hostility between Senior and my lord husband. Han Li sneered. Dissolve? Your Devil Dao sect and my Heavenly Dao alliance have always been at odds. What is there to dissolve? Before she could respond further, Marquis Nanlong called out, Come over, fellow Taoists. We will first distribute the treasures of this floor before ascending. Han Li ignored Yan Ruyan's lingering gaze and walked toward the shelves. With her following gracefully, her expression flickering with conflicting emotions. Wang Chan noticed but chose to remain silent, while Wang Tiangu paid it no attention. Marquis Nanlong gathered all items onto one shelf and clarified. There are 6 ancient treasures, 10 magic treasures, and 8 shares of materials and medicine pills. Organized by value, ancient treasures are most coveted, as their full power is displayed without refinement. Magic treasures, though not fully potent initially, still hold immense power and are worth refining. Fellow Taoists Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan, you are allocated 1 share each. An elderly woman immediately claimed. At my age, I have no time to refine magic treasures. I will take an ancient treasure. The others quietly smirked at her bluntness. Wang Tiangu then addressed Marquis Nanlong, asking if he and fellow Taoist Yun would not take first pick. Marquis Nanlong's expression darkened, coldly replying, "There is nothing here we wish to claim first. Han Li may choose freely." Han Li casually stated, "I also will not use my privilege now. I will keep it for the second floor." Wang Tiangu agreed, and they proceeded to divide the treasures evenly. If someone took an ancient treasure, they forfeited the right to a magic treasure. The white-clothed old man and the tan man opted for 2 magic treasures and their share of materials and medicine pills, while others took single ancient treasures. Han Li selected a bamboo tube, its power unknown, placing it casually into his storage pouch, alongside his share of materials and pills. Once distribution concluded, Han Li noticed the white-clothed old man discarding the praying mat and no one taking interest in the yin focus herb. Likely undervaluing it, he chuckled inwardly. These nascent soul cultivators were thorough, and the possibility of hidden treasures had already been considered. After inspecting the first floor once more without incident, the group ascended to the second floor and were immediately struck by the scene. The air was thick with incense, rising from a fire-red cauldron in front of a golden statue of a ferocious single-horned demon with 6 raised arms. Lifelike in its aggression, Marquis Nanlong and the others were taken aback. Master Cang Kun had enshrined a demon beast. Han Li's heart leapt as he recognized the statue. It was identical to the demon beast depicted in the sacred provenance plate, even down to its fierce gaze and 6 outstretched arms. His eyes scanned the room further. 10 meters away, a simple desk and chair held an ink slab, brush, and bamboo slips, suggesting Master Cang Kun's study. Opposite this shrine, a blue jade bed exuded a frigid aura, carved as if from glacial ice. On top lay 3 eye-catching jade boxes, clearly valuable. Before Han Li could approach, the white-clothed old man appeared at the bed in a blur, seizing one of the jade boxes. However, a new silhouette appeared, hand glowing with black light, pointing threateningly at the old man's back. In his alarmed fury, he glared at his attacker with hostility. "What are you doing? You wish to exchange blows with me?" The attacker with the fluttering robes was Wang Tiangu. Han Li listened to the exchange like a calm observer watching pieces move on a chessboard. The room had already hung heavy with tension, 3 opaque jade boxes resting on a jade bed, sharp eyes circling them, and an agreement about first pick that now threatened to tear the assembly apart. Wang Tiangu's voice, cool and measured, proposed something simple on the surface, because the jade boxes could not be inspected with spiritual sense. Those who currently had priority selection should not be allowed to open them first. Instead, each fellow Taoist could choose another visible item if unsure. It was framed as fairness, but the tone and timing carried a deeper motive. The white-clothed elder, fellow Taoist Yun, snapped back. Offended, he insisted the original terms had been agreed upon, and that perception of what was inside was a reasonable part of choosing one's prize. Marquis Nanlong, standing nearby, narrowed his eyes and added a threat to that resistance. He believed the jade boxes were likely the most valuable items here and he would not be denied the right to inspect before choosing. The room's balance began to tilt as murmurs spread. Alliances were forming like cracks in thin ice. Wang Tiangu's counter was subtle and strategic. He reminded the group that the overall hall on the second floor was small, far fewer treasures than they'd expected. Those 3 jade boxes were likely the crown jewels of the trove, perhaps profound cultivation arts. forbidden techniques, or the secret of Devilfall Valley itself. If the two with priority selection insisted on peeking, they would take the lion's share and leave scraps for everyone else. He suggested, not aggressively but pointedly, that the community could not be allowed to be shortchanged. The old woman, Lady Tai, stepped in to support Wang Tiangu. She framed the argument as principled. Priority selection meant first pick, not the right to inspect closed boxes with spiritual senses. Inspecting would nullify the fairness that priority was supposed to protect. That remark landed like a pebble that rippled outward. Two other cultivators, one tan-skinned and the other stern-faced, found themselves unconsciously aligning with Wang Tiangu's side. Suddenly, 4 early Nascent Soul cultivators and 2 late core formation cultivators stood together opposite Marquis Nanlong and fellow Taoist Yun. Han Li, neutral until now, had become the pivot on which the fate of the argument would turn. Marquis Nanlong's stare found Han Li. He needed a decision, even a slight tilt, and he asked plainly what Han Li would do. Han Li considered his options, eyes shifting across faces he knew well. Wang Tiangu's expression betrayed no urgency. He smiled calmly as if nothing more than a civilized debate was unfolding. At his side Wang Chan seemed eager, and Yan Ruyan looked uncertain. The stern-faced cultivator and Lady Tai betrayed no alarm. Everything about their composure suggested premeditation. Han Li's pulse quickened with a subtle alarm. Things didn't add up. If Wang Tiangu intended a genuine compromise, he would have approached Han Li earlier, or at least revealed some sign of bargaining. Instead, the offer stank of calculation. Coax Han Li into neutrality. Let the 2 mid-stage Nascent Soul cultivators be isolated, and then finish them off. If Marquis Nanlong and fellow Taoist Yun were removed, the conspirators could split the spoils without meaningful opposition. Han Li chose his words carefully. He declared neutrality and said he would not oppose whatever decision Wang Tiangu or Marquis Nanlong reached. That neutrality was expected. Han Li had always been cautious, but it masked a sharper purpose. He deliberately stepped slightly away from both groups, giving himself room to react. Marquis Nanlong relaxed. Han Li's neutrality fortified his confidence. He gave a cold smile as if to prepare a rebuttal. But the scene suddenly detonated. Fellow Taoist Yun, the white-clothed elder, moved in a blur. Without warning he spat a bright, shining magic treasure into the air, the silver wheel. It flew like a controlled bullet, tearing through Marquis Nanlong's golden light defense. The wheel struck him square in the chest, leaving a depression in his azure breast armor and forcing him back with a groan of pain. The assembled cultivators were stunned. Marquis Nanlong, having been struck from an unexpected quarter, retaliated instinctively. A small golden blade shot from his palm aimed straight for the old man. But the old man had anticipated counterstrikes. He blurred to Wang Tiangu's side, used the silver wheel to intercept the blade, and exposed an unexpected truth. Beneath his torn robes the elder wore azure rhino armor. The armor had taken the brunt of the blow and, even though dented, had saved him. The room filled with shocked whispers. Yuan Yun had not been acting alone or irrationally. With a hiss of fury Marquis Nanlong accused the elder of being bought, of betrayal. The old man ignored the accusation. He had already moved into open hostility. He warned the room with cold clarity. Marquis Nanlong could not be allowed to leave alive because his cultivation level would bring great trouble if he survived. That verdict altered everything. The conspirators who had been feigning neutrality now unveiled their true intent. The stern-faced cultivator and the one who had been watching in silence joined the assault, spitting out a flying misty white saber. The white-clothed elder's silver wheel had bought them a moment, but it was clear the situation had descended into attempted execution. Wang Tiangu turned to Han Li and spoke with an amiable, hedged offer. "Help us take him down, and you'll receive a share of his treasures." He spoke as if extending an olive branch, simple, practical, lucrative, but every syllable had been arranged as a trap. Han Li, seeing the staircase guarded and the exit sealed by a white flickering restriction, knew there was no easy escape. The old woman had silently moved to lock the way out. The walls, glittering with barrier light, made it plain the pavilion had been prepared for arrest or bloodshed, a killbox, not a negotiation. Han Li knew the logic of their plan. They wanted to split the assembly, remove Marquis Nanlong and fellow Taoist Yun first, and then turn on any remaining opposition. If Han Li accepted the offer, they would either betray him later or claim he was complicit if he refused. They would simply kill him as the next loose end, faced with a choice between obvious danger and an even deeper deception. He did not capitulate. He kept his voice even and his expression calm, giving no hint of panic. He recognized the only chance was to preserve himself and to exploit whatever tiny advantage remained. But Marquis Nanlong, wounded though he was, still had pride and strategy. He scoffed at Wang Tiangu's attempt to recruit allies through treachery. He admitted he did not know the precise measures Wang Tiangu had taken to sway members of their group. But he appealed to Han Li directly. "Join us." And there was still hope. Join them, and the hall would be split, every side preying on the other. He was blunt and unflinching. This was not a moral appeal but a tactical one. "If we form a united front," he said, "we stand a chance. But if we allow them to deal with us separately, we will certainly meet our doom." As Marquis Nanlong spoke, he brushed his hand past his chest. In a pulse of soft white light, the depression in the armor was restored back to normal. His seemingly miraculous recovery caught the attention of everyone present. Wang Tiangu and the other cultivators were surprised. But the old man in white calmly explained that Marquis Nanlong was only suppressing his wounds temporarily through a secret technique. His body, however, was still damaged, and if they wanted to win, they should focus on killing him first. With a wave of his hand, the old man summoned his magic treasure, a silver wheel, that floated above his head and released a mist of white light. His figure became hazy and indistinct within that glow, showing he was preparing for a serious battle. Wang Tiangu nodded, agreeing with the old man's strategy. He quickly turned to a stern-faced cultivator and said coldly, "Brother Long, deal with that youngster. Han Li, don't try to kill him, just keep him busy until we've taken care of Marquis Nanlong." Without hesitation, Wang Tiangu's body flared with black radiance, a meter-tall aura of darkness that enveloped him completely. The other cultivators, the old woman and the tan man, also released their own magic treasures, readying themselves for battle. The stern-faced cultivator grinned as he pulled out a milky white jade scepter and confidently stepped forward. "Not a problem," he said with a cold smile. "I'll deal with fellow Taoist Han." From his point of view, restraining a newly advanced Nascent Soul cultivator was no real challenge. Han Li watched in silence, his expression unreadable, but when he saw the old woman move away from the stairwell, his heart tightened. His hand instinctively gripped the ancient treasure hidden in his sleeve, ready for whatever would come next. At that moment, Marquis Nanlong acted. He swept his sleeve, sending out a mist of golden light that gathered the 3 jade boxes from the bed into his hand. Then, without warning, he tossed one of them to Han Li and said, "Take it, since you're not standing with them. I'll give you this jade box. If it truly contains the secrets of Devilfall Valley and you survive, then that will be your fortune." The others froze, their expressions twisting in shock. None of them had expected this. Han Li caught the box easily, his mind racing. Inside, he was laughing. The treasure that everyone desired had just fallen right into his hands. Of course, he knew Marquis Nanlong wasn't giving it away out of generosity. It was a tactical move, by handing the box to Han Li. Nanlong diverted everyone's attention and created a distraction for his own escape. Still, Han Li couldn't help but find it amusing. Calmly, he flipped his hand and stored the jade box in his pouch. Seeing this, Wang Tiangu's expression darkened. "Channer," he ordered sharply, "assist fellow Taoist Long and make sure Han Li doesn't escape. The rest of us will deal with the Marquis." His composure remained cold and rational despite his desire for the jade box. He sent only the weakest among them to handle Han Li, certain that once Marquis Nanlong fell, Han Li would be easy to deal with afterward. Wang Chan sneered, his eyes glinting with malice. "Yes, second uncle, I was already planning to." With that, he beckoned Yan Ruyan and strode toward Han Li. Yan Ruyan followed quietly, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face before it vanished beneath a mask of calm. Han Li watched the two approach with complete composure. He even found the situation a little ridiculous. Everyone was ready to fight. Yet no one dared make the first move. The tension in the hall was suffocating. Marquis Nanlong's enemies were cautious. They all knew that a cornered mid-nascent soul cultivator was dangerous. If he unleashed his full strength in desperation, one or two of them could easily die with him. So they waited. They calculated. Marquis Nanlong's injuries would worsen over time. And when he grew weak enough, they would strike together. The advantage was clearly theirs, or so they believed. But strangely, Marquis Nanlong didn't show any sign of weakening. He stood completely still, as if unaffected by pain. His complexion, however, was turning redder by the moment, his skin almost glowing with a blood-like hue. The sight made his opponents hesitate even more, worried he was about to unleash some devastating secret technique. The room remained filled with killing intent, yet eerily silent. The stern-faced cultivator didn't rush to attack Han Li, waiting for the right moment. Wang Chan glared murderously, but his cultivation was too low to act rashly. Moments passed. Then Han Li sighed softly, just a quiet breath, but enough to draw attention. The others didn't react. They were too focused on Marquis Nanlong. Only the stern-faced cultivator glanced his way, and Wang Chan let out a mocking laugh, thinking Han Li was nervous. But Han Li was anything but nervous. Calmly, he raised his hand, revealing a pitch-black item that gleamed faintly under the light. Marquis Nanlong instantly narrowed his eyes, recognizing the danger even before he understood what it was. In the next instant, Han Li tossed it into the air. The object spun once before expanding rapidly, growing to over 25 meters tall, until it formed a massive black mountain. A solid wall of darkness separating the two sides of the battle. The stern-faced cultivator froze in shock. He didn't recognize the treasure, but instinctively felt its power. Recovering quickly, he pointed his jade scepter forward. The scepter glowed brilliantly, and from its light emerged a huge, spectral white tiger. With a deafening roar, the beast fired a blazing beam of white energy at the black mountain. The beam struck with a thunderous crash, filling the room with blinding light and shaking the walls. Meanwhile, Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan reacted at once. Wang Chan's body was surrounded by a crimson mist that reeked of blood, while Yan Ruyan's aura glowed with the same red hue but emitted a strange, intoxicating fragrance that clouded the mind. The air grew heavy and thick with spiritual energy. The stern-faced cultivator, seeing his allies' attacks, felt a bit more confident. He directed the white tiger to unleash another beam while pulling out a small, faint blue gourd from his storage pouch. Just as he was about to activate it, a sudden, sharp crack of thunder rolled through the air. Startled, the cultivator quickly formed a hand seal and raised a protective barrier of white light around himself. But before he could even steady his breath, a flash of silver light flickered beside him. Out of thin air, Han Li appeared, his silver wings spread wide from his back, lightning sparking off their edges. The stern-faced cultivator's face twisted in shock. "Ah, you," he shouted, raising his gourd in desperation. A bright bolt of blue lightning shot straight toward Han Li. But Han Li didn't dodge. Instead, he simply opened his mouth and released a thin, deadly thread of blue flame. The blue flames pierced through the white light barrier without the slightest resistance and shot towards the stern-faced cultivator. The meager wisp of blue flame was able to pass through the light barrier unobstructed, much to the surprise of the stern-faced cultivator. Before he could react, the flame struck his neck and spread in an instant. Crackling sounds echoed as blue ice engulfed his entire body, turning him into a lifeless ice sculpture. Han Li had aimed the celestial ice flames precisely at his opponent's neck, drawing on his prior experience from battling the spell warrior. With his head frozen solid, the stern-faced cultivator had no chance to resist or cast any spells. Yet, at that same moment, a bolt of blue lightning from a small gourd struck toward Han Li before even the thunder could sound. But as it reached him, a net of faint golden lightning flashed across Han Li's body. The golden light absorbed the blue lightning entirely, leaving no trace of it behind. Without hesitation, Han Li reached forward and snatched the gourd out of the air. His movements were fluid and impossibly fast, the freezing of the stern-faced cultivator, the absorption of the lightning, and the seizing of the treasure all happened in less than a breath's time. Wang Chan, who had just prepared to move in and assist his ally, froze in disbelief. In the blink of an eye, the man had been defeated without a chance to fight back. Han Li turned his cold gaze toward him, sending a chill down Wang Chan's spine. In a panic, Wang Chan shouted, "Cast together, use the blood spirit arts to restrain him." He grabbed Yan Ruyan's hand and began chanting a strange incantation. Crimson mist poured from their bodies and merged into a swirl of violet bloodlight. Within moments, the two of them vanished into the mist, which began to wail and churn as if demons lurked inside. Han Li only smirked at the sight. Then, a calm voice reached his mind through a voice transmission. It was Marquis Nanlong. "Good. I didn't expect fellow Taoist Han to possess such heaven-defying abilities. If we join hands, we may be able to match them." Han Li glanced over. Marquis Nanlong's group had yet to engage, but their faces showed shock and disbelief. The Marquis himself seemed encouraged by Han Li's power, perhaps believing that together they could turn the situation around. Nanlong quickly added, "So long as you join hands with me, I am willing to give you another jade box." Han Li let out a faint, cold laugh but said nothing. He had no intention of cooperating. He knew well that his quick victory had been due to surprise. If the opponent had been prepared for the celestial ice flames, the fight would have dragged out much longer, and perhaps not ended as cleanly. Besides, the enemy still had 3 early Nascent Soul cultivators and 1 at mid-stage. Marquis Nanlong, gravely injured as he was, would only become a burden. Whatever treasures that Jade Box held were not worth his life. Han Li quickly decided on his course of action. Before he escaped, he needed to make sure the others began fighting among themselves, drawing their attention away from him. Otherwise, he would become the main target once he attempted to flee. Without further hesitation, he flapped his thunderstorm wings and vanished in a blur of lightning. Seeing this, the white-clothed old man shouted in alarm, "Not good, he's trying to escape. Block him, don't let him leave with the jade box." But the others hesitated. The terrifying image of Han Li freezing a Nascent Soul cultivator in a single strike was still fresh in their minds. The old woman, the tan man, even Wang Tiangu, all stood uncertain. They feared him. If Han Li escaped, they could focus all their power on the injured Marquis and claim the remaining treasures. But if they tried to stop Han Li and failed, his mysterious techniques might annihilate them before they could even react. Even Wang Tiangu, the shrewdest among them, found himself wavering. That jade box might contain the secret of Devilfall Valley. Something priceless, but was it worth risking his life for? As they hesitated, Han Li acted. In a flash of lightning, he appeared at the top of the stairs and gave them a mocking smile. He pointed toward the black mountain hovering in the air. Instantly, the mountain trembled and vanished, only to reappear above their heads, crashing down with immense force. The cultivators were caught off guard, furious, yet fearful. Even the white-clothed old man didn't dare to face it head-on. They scattered to the sides as the mountain smashed downward with thunderous power. At that precise moment, Marquis Nanlong seized his chance. His eyes flared with golden light, and his body turned into a streak of radiance that shot directly toward the old woman. She cried out in fear and conjured a small yellow shield. But the Marquis attack was too fierce. Gold and yellow light intertwined for an instant before the golden brilliance swallowed her whole. The others immediately retaliated, hurling their spells and treasures toward the Marquis. But he had already unleashed his own powerful artifacts. His aura grew denser and more violent, revealing the depth of his strength despite his injuries. The chaotic battle erupted in full force. Satisfied, Han Li recalled the Black Mountain. With a flick of his hand, it shrank back into a small form and flew into his palm. Then he turned toward the violet mist where Wang Chan and Yan Ruyan hid. Activating his bright sight spirit eyes, Han Li's pupils glowed blue as he peered into the blood mist. Finding his target, he raised his hand, releasing a surge of black-red light, the Yin Devil execution. The blast tore through the mist, followed by a sharp, Inhuman scream. By the time the echo faded, Han Li's figure had vanished in a flash of lightning. Even if Wang Chan had survived, Han Li knew the man would be gravely wounded. He briefly considered finishing him off but decided against it. If he lingered, Wang Tianggu would surely intervene, and that would entangle him in another dangerous fight. Wang Chan's death could wait, there would be time for that later. Right now, survival was all that mattered. Han Li reappeared at the exit of the building and flew swiftly toward the hall's entrance. Along the way, a streak of white light shot into his sleeve, the small white fox. Silver Moon. Master, she began excitedly. But Han Li cut her off, his tone cold and urgent. Now is not the time to talk. We'll speak after we're safe. When he had broken through the wondrous soul restriction earlier, he'd cleverly used a burst of light to conceal a small gap, just large enough for Silvermoon to slip through. While the others were distracted, he had sent her ahead to gather what she could from the treasure pavilion. Judging by her excitement, she had succeeded, having taken the initiative to seize the treasures. Han Li had refused Marquis Nanlong's proposal to fight together and simply chose to prioritize his own escape. In the instant Han Li shot through the entrance of the hall, he felt an earth-shaking rumble from behind him. He barely had time to register the noise before the Japier pavilion itself ruptured. As if some great, imprisoned sun had been wrenched free. A blazing, 3-meter-wide globe of golden light burst from the wreckage, carrying within it the faint silhouette of Marquis Nanlong. For a heartbeat Han Li stared, not at Nanlong, but at the sheer impossibility of what had happened, a pavilion. A building he had never imagined could be used as a weapon. Torn apart and turned into the vessel for a secret, heaven-defying technique. The sight left Han Li with the chill certainty that Nascent Soul cultivators were forces he had barely begun to understand. He forced himself back to the task before him. The hall's walls were restored but fragile, and he moved with calm, practiced motions. Without theatrics, Han Li reached out, flicked a finger, and a meter-long streak of cold, white sword light sprang from his hand. It struck the opposing wall cleanly, cutting a rough hole. Then, almost at once, the gap disappeared in a flash, swallowed by the hall's strange recovery. He frowned. These walls repaired themselves, or some formation was at work. Before he could puzzle further, his instincts snapped him around. Marquis Nanlong stood 10 meters behind him, golden radiance clinging to his body but his face ashen. The pavilion that had erupted into light was now nested in a shimmering dome, a dome that swallowed sound and hid what raged inside. Occasional bursts of black and white light and muffled explosions pulsed within. Nanlong's movements were deliberate. He held a small fluttering yellow flag and chanted. As if calling on a treasure's last will, Han Li realized, with a tightness in his chest, that Nanlong had used the pavilion itself as a last-ditch mechanism. He had turned it into an ancient treasure that could both strike and then entrap his attackers. The Marquis spoke quickly, his tone strained but steady. The outer restrictions, he explained, could only be opened with a formation flag, a single flag. And only he had it. That left them with a narrow window. The formation would delay pursuers but not for long. Han Li had no time for delicate courtesies. He slapped at his storage pouch and produced an emerald green formation plate, the same kind of magic tool that had helped him break through the wondrous soul restriction earlier. He traced azure talisman characters in the air, blew them onto the plate, and the tool flashed to life. With an incantation gesture and 2 soft words, "Rise," Han Li redirected the formation's power. One side of the hall's crystal walls receded back to blue crystal, insulating them from the chaos. Marquis Nanlong's relief was immediate, but faint. He had expected a stronger hold. The crystal now seemed dimmer than it had been, its strength chipped by the earlier struggle. Nanlong tossed his small yellow flag into the wall. It vanished as an ember of light. Then everywhere the hall trembled. From behind them the sound of something immense fighting to break free surged up. Rumbles. Explosions. The nails on steel urgency of a prison being forced open. The crystal walls quivered and began to glow. Han Li, calculating quickly, tossed a spirit beast pouch into the air. A swarm of black tainted gold devouring beetles spilled out, frantic and fierce. Then, At his command and like armor forming on an invisible body, they converged and transformed into tricolored insectal armor around him. It was Jindan-grade brutality applied to defense. The Marquis raised an eyebrow at the insect armor technique. But there was no time for questions. The walls shook violently. A nearby stone wall began to part with white light, revealing a stairway, a narrow, hope-slim stair that led downward and perhaps out. With a surge of golden light, Marquis Nanlong propelled himself toward it. Han Li unfurled his thunderstorm wings. Lightning crackled along the membrane of his wings and he vanished in a streak of soundless speed. He reappeared before Nanlong in midair for a second. Then dove, the stairs shuddering behind them with the impact of magical blows. They didn't get far. An ear-splitting cry rose from the stairwell, and a spear of blinding golden radiance shot upward and streaked across the sky. Marquis Nanlong circled once in the air, voice thin and cold. He left Han Li with an oath, if Han Li ever fell into his hands. Nanlong promised to exterminate both his body and soul. Then, like a thread of sunlight being drawn out and snapped, the Marquis' golden radiance thinned to a line and tore into the distance. In a single breath he was gone. Han Li continued on, his wings flaring and flickering as he pushed his lightning movement to its limit. From far behind him 2 more lights cut through the air, a silver flash and a trailing black streak that resolved into a familiar silhouette. The white-clothed elder who had been part of the ambush called out. Analyzing what they had just witnessed, he identified Nanlong's escape as the use of a rare secret technique called the Malesht line, a method credited to Master Cang Kun. The price of such a technique, the elder said, was vast. It consumed tremendous amounts of vitality and blood essence. And while it allowed travel in a line, thin as a thread, and hid one's aura, it was crippling. It would allow one to vanish from spiritual sense, but it would not leave the user untouched. Even a mid-nascent soul cultivator using it while injured would be gravely harmed. Beside him, Wang Tiangu and the others hurried from the passage, gauging the retreating forms. The old woman's face paled. The Tan cultivator's nerves were raw. They worried aloud. With such movement techniques, Han Li and Nanlong could escape and vanish. But the white-clothed elder, laconic, bitter, offered reasons to breathe. Nanlong might have escaped the immediate trap, he said, but given the beating he had already taken and the price of the Malesht line, his recovery would be painfully slow. The elder added, almost casually, that he had not relied on luck alone. He had contingency plans to track an enemy who couldn't move beyond 150 kilometers in one stretch. That knowledge eased the others. The old woman, clutching at her black jade lotus and the fragile promise of shared secrets from Devilfall Valley, admitted relief. They had risked much for those treasures and for the chance to share in Devilfall's mysteries. The Tan man, less comfortable, explained their motive in guarded tones. They had colluded against Marquis Nanlong because of the reward, access to forbidden secrets. And when the elder's identity was discussed, the white-clothed elder revealed quietly that he had once belonged to the Ghost Spirit sect. He had kept many things hidden from the rest, including his connections and his reluctance to kill Nanlong. He confessed that Nanlong had once been his friend and that his motives were complicated. At last, the elder made himself plain, his voice low and steady. Nanlong had been a descendant of Master Cang Kun and wished to ally with the Righteous Dao Heavenpeak sect. The elder feared the Righteous Dao's expansion. He saw Nanlong's plan to bring the Heavenpeak's support into Devilfall Valley as a threat. For him, the choice had been stark: tolerate the growth of a rival power, or act to prevent it. He had acted. There was no pretense of joy in his words, only a sober admission of necessity. As such, I couldn't just stand by and allow the Righteous Dao to grow in power. I had no option but to deal with him. With a slight surprise, the old woman asked, Marquis Nanlong has ties with the Heavenpeak sect? Fellow Taoist Yun, you didn't mention this matter before. As for the Tan cultivator, he appeared furious. Old man Yun, calm and composed, smiled slightly. I didn't hide anything, you must have overlooked it. However, Marquis Nanlong hasn't officially joined the Heavenpeak sect. If you're worried, you can join my Ghost Spirit sect and become elders. That way, the Heavenpeak sect won't dare to touch you. The old woman snorted coldly. Given my age, I've no desire to be bound by sect rules again. The Tan cultivator agreed, his voice steady and distant. I'm used to my freedom and have no interest in joining your sect. Unbothered by their rejection, Old Man Yun chuckled. That's truly a pity. If you both joined, our prestige would soar. But no matter, let's return to business. So long as Marquis Nanlong is killed here, the Heaven Peak sect won't risk retaliation for a dead man. His tone turned more sinister as he added, even though we were friends for 100 years. He never told me his true intentions for Devilfall Valley. I only knew that a secret cave residence and a map left behind by Master Cang Kun existed. When we capture him, we won't destroy his nascent soul immediately. I'll scour his soul and extract everything he knows. Wang Tiangu then voiced his concern. But if that map was in the box that Han Li escaped with, we might be left with nothing. Old Man Yun waved his hand dismissively. That's manageable. If that's the case, we'll leak the news to the great sects of the Heavenly South. Even the Heavenly Tao Alliance would covet such a secret. Once chaos erupts, we can profit amidst the disorder. Let's see how that small drifting cloud sect deals with the storm of greed they'll unleash upon themselves. Besides, even if the map spreads, Marquis Nanlong's knowledge of Devilfall Valley will still be of great value to us. After a pause, Wang Tiangu nodded. If that's how it goes, we can only adapt. Still, perhaps Han Li would be willing to trade the map, even if he resents us. There's almost nothing in this world that can't be traded for. Old Man Yun smiled approvingly. A wise idea, Brother Wang. Still, that youngster's strength is truly beyond comprehension. His cunning surpassed even ours. And he managed to defeat fellow Taoist Long. Were I to face him alone, I'm not sure I could prevail. Wang Tiangu's expression darkened. I've heard from my nephew Wang Chan that Han Li was once a mere foundation establishment cultivator from Yellow Maple Valley. Yet in just a few decades, he's reached this level. His rise defies logic. If not for his interference, we'd have already disposed of Marquis Nanlong. The others could only smile bitterly at the reminder of Han Li's unexpected power. Then Wang Tiangu turned serious. Let's return and free fellow Taoist Long. With his cultivation, he may have survived the ice. And, I fear for my nephew. Before Han Li left, he used a blood-red light that looked like my devil blood cleave technique. I don't know how badly Channer was hurt. The group agreed and quickly flew back to the mountain ruins. They soon arrived at the shattered remains of the Jadepier Pavilion. There, Yan Ruyan knelt beside Wang Chan's motionless body, her face pale and confused. Wang Tiangu's voice turned icy. What happened? Are his vital organs intact? Yan Ruyan hesitated, her expression trembling. No, but his legs. Wang Tiangu stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Wang Chan's legs were gone below the knees, but strangely, there was no blood. Yan Ruyan explained anxiously. We joined hands to cast the blood spirit art's blood mist, but a strange attack pierced through it. My husband dodged too late, his legs were instantly severed. Wang Tiangu frowned. Then why haven't you begun healing him? You know such techniques. I've tried several times, she said helplessly, but my spells won't respond. There's black chi condensed around the wounds, it won't disperse. I believe it's blocking the healing and keeping him unconscious. Wang Tiangu leaned in, his eyes cold and analytical. The faint black chi swirled ominously over the stumps. With a flick of his hand, black light gathered at his fingertips, and he drew out the dark mist into a small, pea-sized sphere. He considered burning it away but decided against it, sealing it instead in a jade bottle for study. Clearly, he wanted to understand Han Li's mysterious technique. When Yan Ruyan saw his cold indifference, her expression flickered with unease, but she said nothing. After cleansing the remaining black chi, she once again tried to restore Wang Chan's legs, while Wang Tiangu turned toward the others. Nearby, Old Man Yun, the old woman, and the Tan cultivator were gathered around a body encased in thick blue ice, the body of fellow Taoist Long. Wang Tiangu approached, puzzled. Why haven't you freed him yet? The old woman's face was grim. Freed him? This ice, it's more insidious than we thought. The old man stood silent, his eyes dark and heavy. The tan cultivator gestured toward the frozen corpse. "Watch." He hurled a chunk of jade at the icy figure. The moment it touched, the jade froze solid, turning crystal blue before shattering into glittering dust. Then he sent a beam of true fire at the ice, but as soon as the flame touched, it vanished, instantly absorbed by the cold surface. Wang Tiangu felt a chill crawl up his spine. Old man Yun sighed. "This ice is terrifying. It seems fellow Taoist Long's physical body is already dead. We can only hope his nascent soul still survives. If so, he can manifest and perhaps possess another body." But the tan cultivator shook his head. "No, this was his original body. He hasn't possessed anyone before." Old man Yun nodded. "Then his nascent soul must still be intact. We just need to call it out." As if on cue, the ice-clad body suddenly flared with white light. A muffled explosion followed, and the body disintegrated into ash. From the glowing remains, a tiny nascent soul appeared, its face twisted with rage. It clutched a small jade ornament in its hand and spat out scarlet nascent flames onto it. The red-white flames surged around the nascent soul, wrapping it in a burning aura as it tried to force its way free from the icy prison. "Wait!" Old man Yun suddenly cried out, realization flashing across his face, but it was too late. The nascent soul passed through the ice barrier. What happened next froze everyone's hearts. The moment the red-white flames met the air, the blue ice seemed to come alive, igniting the nascent soul in eerie blue fire. The nascent soul shrieked in agony as its own vital flames were consumed. It darted through the air, screaming and struggling to extinguish the blue blaze. For a few moments, its wails echoed through the ruins, chilling all who heard. Then, suddenly, the screams stopped, the light dimmed, and the last remnants of the nascent soul dissolved into nothingness. The cultivator surnamed Long was now dead, in both soul and body. Through use of lightning movement, Han Li was able to travel 50 kilometers in a single stretch. Then, pausing briefly to regain his bearings, he changed his technique, swapping to the blood-red cloak that turned him into a streak of crimson light darting across the sky. After flying another 500 kilometers, he spotted a large Moulan tribe settlement below, tens of thousands of mortals moving in groups across the plains. Excitement flickered in his heart. Back at the drifting cloud sect, he had once heard discussions among the elders about the war between the Moulan spell warriors and the cultivators of the heavenly south. Although the ordinary Moulan mortals could not cultivate spiritual techniques, they still played a role in war. During campaigns, the Moulan spell warriors often organized these mortals into temporary parties, using them to seize spirit stone mines and material resources left unguarded by the heavenly south cultivators. Because the cultivators were focused on the main battlefront, these mortals could plunder freely. The Moulan never returned empty-handed, and though the Nine Nations Union knew of this looting, they could do little to stop it. If they stationed too few cultivators, those guards could easily be slaughtered by high-ranking Moulan spell warriors. If they stationed too many, it would weaken their own front lines. So they simply turned a blind eye. Once the war shifted, they would retake those areas later, though it often meant massacring the Moulan mortals left behind. But the Moulan didn't care. For them, mortal lives were expendable. When one group died, they simply sent another. Now, hovering silently in the sky, Han Li saw long lines of ox carts making their way south. Young men and women walked alongside them, a mobile division of mortals gathering resources for the Moulan. He extended his spiritual sense, sweeping over the entire column. Among the thousands of mortals, he detected one Foundation establishment cultivator and 3 at Qi condensation stage, all low-level spell warriors assigned to oversee the caravan. Han Li lowered his gaze thoughtfully. Then, forming a quick hand seal, his figure blurred, vanishing and reappearing beside an old, dilapidated ox cart filled with tattered hides and worn tools. With a casual wave of his arm, he turned its contents into ash, and without hesitation, sat inside. He had made his decision, returning directly to the heavenly south now, while the Moulan spell warriors were on full alert, would be too dangerous, alone, without the other nascent soul cultivators who had accompanied him before. Even he could fall prey to one of the Moulan's top-ranked spell warriors. Hiding among a caravan of mortals, however, would be far safer. Few would pay any attention to such a group, and with his cultivation, unless a late Nascent Soul spell warrior inspected them personally, his presence would remain perfectly hidden. Once he crossed the desert beyond the Moulan Plains, he'd be free of their influence and could safely return home. As he meditated quietly within the cart, the voices of the Moulan mortals drifted in from outside. Their language was different from that of the heavenly south, but Han Li understood it easily. He had studied several jade slips containing their dialects and mastered them with his spiritual sense in just a few days. They spoke of the mission, wondering how much they could gather to please their grand sages, hoping to earn praise and rise above their peers. From their tone, it was clear they viewed the spell warriors as divine beings, worthy of reverence and even worship. Many believed it was an honor to die in their service. Han Li sighed quietly and, with a flick of his wrist, cast a faint azure barrier around the cart, sealing it off from sound. The outside world fell silent. Then, he called out softly, "Silvermoon, how about you tell me what you've gained? From your excitement, it seems you've found quite a few treasures." His sleeve stirred, and a small white fox fluttered out, landing gracefully in front of him. Silvermoon's eyes sparkled. "I'm not entirely sure how valuable these items are," she said with a sly grin. "But you should be able to tell, Master. On the first floor, there were many ancient treasures. But I didn't take any. Their spiritual chi was too strong, I couldn't hide it while moving. Instead, I explored the second floor, where I found 6 ancient jade boxes. I took half of them, 3. She giggled lightly. "I wanted to take more, but that would have drawn suspicion. This way, no one will notice." With that, she spat out 3 translucent jade boxes, placing them neatly before Han Li. Han Li then took out another jade box, the one the Marquis had given him earlier, and compared them. They were identical in appearance. A faint smile curved his lips. "So, Master Cang Kun left behind a total of 6 jade boxes, and now I possess 4 of them. It seems my decision to go was indeed correct." Silvermoon let out a small sigh, still trembling slightly from the memory. "Master, your courage was remarkable. With so many Nascent Soul cultivators present, you dared to act in secret, and even sent me ahead first. Weren't you afraid of being discovered?" Han Li chuckled softly, glancing at her. "What was there to fear? At worst, I could have used blood shadow evasion to escape. Besides, I was nearly certain it would work. When I used spiritual light to conceal your entry, no one noticed a thing. My only worry was that you might fail to hide yourself after taking the boxes, but it seems your evasion techniques exceeded my expectations." Silvermoon laughed modestly. "You flatter me, Master. While my clan's evasion arts are powerful, the key was concealing the jade box's spiritual chi within my body. Still, had one of those old monsters truly focused their senses, I'm not sure I could have escaped unseen." Han Li smiled again, not pressing the point. Instead, he turned his attention to the jade boxes before him. Azure light shimmered from his palm as he placed it atop the first box. The box absorbed the light smoothly, glowing faintly in response. With a soft click, the lid opened, revealing a blue jade slip resting inside. Han Li took a deep breath and picked it up carefully, pressing it to his forehead as he immersed his spiritual sense within. Silvermoon waited anxiously, eyes full of curiosity. Minutes passed in silence. Han Li's expression remained calm, unreadable. Finally, his eyes flickered, and he withdrew his spiritual sense. After a moment of silent contemplation, he tucked the jade slip away without a word and reached for the next box. Silvermoon's tail twitched, but she said nothing. Using the same technique, Han Li opened the second box. Inside was a small, jet black ring, its surface dull, without the faintest gleam of spiritual light. Silvermoon tilted her head, surprised. "Is that an ancient treasure?" Han Li studied it, frowning slightly. "It doesn't seem to be. There's very little spiritual chi. It's likely just a common magic tool." He turned it over in his hand several times, probing it with his spiritual sense, then said decisively, "The material is unusual. but I can't determine its use yet." Silvermoon's ears drooped slightly. "So it's only a magic tool?" Han Li remained calm. "Don't worry, since Master Cang Kun sealed it inside one of these jade boxes. It must serve a special purpose. Perhaps it will prove valuable later." Silvermoon's eyes lit up again. Her curiosity reignited. She tilted her head and said with excitement, "Master, how about taking a look at what's inside the other 2 boxes?" Han Li opened each of the remaining boxes one by one. One contained a small green bottle, while another held a fist-sized chunk of something that glowed with a mysterious purple light. Curious, Han Li carefully uncorked the green bottle and took a cautious sniff. Instantly, an extremely sharp and caustic scent struck his nose, making him grimace. He quickly closed the bottle, realizing it was some form of venom, and glanced at it with a mix of curiosity and caution before carefully setting it aside. His attention then shifted to the purple object. Gently squeezing it between his fingers, he noticed how incredibly soft it was. Strands of shimmering light occasionally flickered across its surface, casting a dazzling display. Astonishment broke across Han Li's face as he yelped, "Yi!" Concentrating his spiritual sense, he examined the object carefully, trying to discern its true nature. Suddenly, the purple sphere trembled in his hand, transforming briefly into a swirling cloud above his head before settling back into its original form. It appeared layered, like a net of glistening purple threads, delicate yet strangely potent. Silvermoon, who was observing, reacted with amazement. "Isn't that a purple cloudless?" she asked, her voice tinged with reverence. "It's an ancient treasure, famous even in antiquity." Joy sparked in Han Li's eyes. "You know this treasure?" he asked eagerly. "Could it be a divine spirit treasure?" Silvermoon shook her head, smiling faintly. "No, although it is a top-grade ancient treasure, it doesn't compare to divine spirit treasures. Its strength lies in defense. It's incredibly flexible and can cover vast areas depending on how well it's refined. Some say the greatest purple cloudless could shield 50 kilometers. Though I cannot confirm that. It's also highly effective at trapping enemies and can release Jade Sun True Fire to attack foes." A flicker of disappointment crossed Han Li's face at the thought that this wasn't a divine spirit treasure. But it quickly shifted to curiosity. "Silvermoon, you seem quite knowledgeable about this. Have you seen one before?" For a moment, Silvermoon fell silent. Then, with a wry smile, she admitted, "Now that you mention it, I recall a fragment of memory before I became an artifact spirit. There was one particular purple cloudless I knew well." Her expression grew pensive, but she shook her head, as though the memory was slipping away. Han Li mused quietly, realizing that this treasure likely came from Devilfall Valley. Unfortunately, none of the jade boxes they had recovered contained information about it, information that might have been in Marquis Nanlong's boxes. Despite the missed opportunity, Han Li wasn't disheartened. He knew that uncovering Devilfall Valley's secrets would grant him more treasures. But it would also make him a prime target. Silvermoon asked whether the jade slip had contained any information. Han Li replied matter-of-factly that it only held Master Cang Kun's cultivation arts and some secret techniques. While he couldn't cultivate the main whole moon arts, the insights it provided were still valuable. Silvermoon sighed, clearly a little disappointed, but remained silently supportive. After securing the treasures, Han Li began to meditate, while Silvermoon curled up nearby, her eyes staring blankly at a corner of the cart. 2 days passed as the army of Moulan mortals slowly advanced, with spell warriors searching intermittently. Each time, Han Li was able to conceal himself with ease, avoiding detection entirely, since his cart carried only trivial items. None of the Moulan soldiers bothered to inspect it closely. Once the army left the Moulan Plains, Han Li quietly departed with Silvermoon, choosing a different route heading toward the heavenly south. Using his vast spiritual sense, he detected any spell warriors within 50 kilometers, allowing him to evade them effortlessly. He traveled through the desert and into the state of Fengyuan, one of the 9 nations union countries closest to the Moulan Plains. Despite several days in Fengyuan, he encountered no cultivators, only patrols of spell warriors, indicating that the 9 nations had likely retreated after initial skirmishes. The true battle, it seemed, had not yet begun. Han Li pressed on through a particularly desolate area. After 4 smooth days of travel, he suddenly noticed a small, obscure mountain and detected powerful spiritual fluctuations. The aura was filled with violent intent, clear signs of a battle between high-grade cultivators. Curious, he approached cautiously and discerned 5 core formation stage fighters struggling against a Nascent Soul eccentric. The fight was intense, with colorful lights flashing across the sky and explosions echoing through the mountain pass. The 5 core formation cultivators fought with skill and coordination, controlling their magic treasures expertly. Yet, the yellow-robed, bald Nascent Soul warrior steadily pushed them back with swirling circles of yellow mist. Though he had yet to unleash his full power, his techniques and cultivation were formidable. The presence of a beautiful female cultivator among the 5 seemed to temper his aggression. Han Li's attention was drawn to the fat old man among the 5. Covered in spiraling silver lightning and wielding a massive sword magic treasure. He was clearly the strongest. Recognition dawned on Han Li as he muttered under his breath, astonished at the coincidence. The bald Nascent Soul cultivator, growing impatient, glared at the woman. "Girl," he warned, "if you cannot recognize my good intentions, and fail to surrender, do not blame me for being ruthless." Spitting out a yellow feather that glowed faintly with markings, he caught it in his hand, signaling impending danger. The core formation cultivators stiffened, realizing the gravity of the situation. They understood the warrior had been holding back, but could not retreat. With grim determination, they focused all their magical power, pushing back against the yellow mist and regaining some momentum. This only fueled the spell warrior's fury. Channeling his power, he spat yellow chi onto his magic treasure while uttering incantations. The feather trembled in the air, then fanned out, creating a whistling gale. In an instant, the gale escalated into a massive, 100-meter-tall tornado, completely engulfing the 5 core formation cultivators. The fearsome, earth-shaking gales caused the magic treasures to unsteadily sway. They trembled violently, bound by the force of the wind, incapable of breaking free. At the center of the chaos stood a bald spell warrior, a bizarre smile twisting his features, eyes glinting with pride. "Haha, if you won't accept my kindness, then I will use force." "How reckless. Don't expect me to stop after matters have reached this far," he proclaimed. Without warning, he thrust his hand into the air, forming a massive yellow hand from his wing-like energy, reaching directly for a beautiful female cultivator. His plan was clear. Capture her first and then exterminate the remaining 4 cultivators with his full power. The woman, desperate to defend herself, attempted to wield her blazing flame sword magic treasure, but the gales twisted her weapon uncontrollably. She could not maintain control, leaving her defenseless and her face paling with fear. The other 4 cultivators, though determined to intervene, were tossed aside by the raging windstorm. Only the fat old man, possessing the deepest cultivation among them, could somewhat resist the force. In desperation, he raised his hand and released a bolt of lightning, 1 meter long, striking toward the giant yellow hand, but it was utterly ineffective. When the massive hand was just 3 meters away from the woman, it vanished without warning. At the same time, the yellow-robed spell warrior roared in alarm as the oppressive windstorm trapping the core formation cultivator dissipated as if it had never existed. The group of cultivators stared in disbelief, turning to the bald spell warrior, only to find him staring furiously into empty space. Utterly baffled, with rage contorting his face, he shouted, "Since you've dared to break my technique, why would you hide so stealthily?" He seemed to ignore the core formation cultivators entirely now. From the unseen direction, a calm voice spoke, leisurely and unperturbed. "It isn't that I'm hiding myself. It's simply that your cultivation is too lacking to perceive me. You must have only recently entered Nascent Soul stage. You are far weaker than other spell warriors I have encountered." Then, in a flash of azure light, a youth of unremarkable appearance appeared before them. It was Han Li. Observing the desperate situation of the 5 cultivators, he released an azure essence sword streak toward the storm, immediately dissipating it. The 5 were initially shocked by Han Li's sudden appearance, but upon sensing his Nascent Soul stage, their tension dissolved into relief. Their lives clearly saved. The female cultivator, Ni Ying saluted him from a distance with deep respect. Han Li noted her name, a faint memory stirring within him. But there was no time to dwell on it. He simply waved his arm, signaling for her to stop her salute. Time had passed, almost 200 years, and it was natural that the woman and the old man did not recognize him. Turning his gaze toward the yellow-robed spell warrior, Han Li spoke flatly, "Since your esteemed self hasn't fled, it seems you wish to take me on?" The bald spell warrior laughed heartily. Undeterred, "You are only an early nascent soul cultivator." Bold words. "Indeed. Very well. I will demonstrate my abilities." He flicked his finger, shooting 2 shining yellow pellets into the air. Han Li did not move, observing silently with mild interest. The spell warrior, encouraged by his apparent indifference, completed an incantation, shrouding himself in surging yellow clouds. "Rise," he commanded. A low rumbling emerged from the ground, growing to a world-quaking roar. Han Li extended 2 10-meter sword streaks from his sleeves toward the origin of the sound. Though they struck true, they had no effect. Then, with a rush of wind, 2 40-meter horned yellow dragons burst from the earth, charging toward the bald spell warrior. Surrounding him protectively, Han Li realized these were constrained spirit beasts, entirely formed from earth, seemingly alive, their demonic yellow radiance pulsing from the pellets on their heads. The bald spell warrior smiled furiously. "Your esteemed self shall witness the might of my constrained spirit beasts." He struck the dragons with yellow spell seals, sending them toward Han Li with overwhelming force. Han Li furrowed his brow, lightly sighing, then spat a sliver of celestial ice flames. It split into 2 thinner streaks, striking the dragons' heads precisely. The flames instantly encased them in ice, halting their advance 10 meters before him. With a flash of azure light, 2 explosions shattered the frozen dragons as Han Li sent sword streaks toward them. Calmly, he retrieved the yellow pellets and placed them in his storage pouch, all the while watching the spell warrior with leisurely curiosity. Han Li spoke, his tone composed. "What other abilities do you have? Please don't hesitate to use them. I wish to see the true might of the spell warrior's spirit techniques." The bald spell warrior, shocked at the effortless defeat of his dragons, remained silent. Then, from the yellow clouds, he spoke sullenly. "What sect do you come from? Your name, if I may ask?" "You do not match any known cultivators. Did you also enter Nascent Soul stage in the last 100 years?" "I am a nameless individual. If I gave my name, you wouldn't know it. Since fellow Taoist does not intend to attack, I shall not be polite." Han Li replied, expression sullen. He slapped his spirit beast pouch, releasing countless golden flying insects, the meticulously nurtured gold-devouring beetles, for the first time against an enemy, intending to test their effectiveness against a nascent soul opponent. The bald spell warrior gasped. "Gold-devouring beetles? You actually possess them? And so many?" Terrified, he fled without waiting for an attack, tearing through the skies in a streak of yellow light. Han Li, recognizing the danger of pursuing a fully focused nascent soul cultivator, let him go, recalling his spirit beast pouch with calm. Flying toward the core formation cultivators, Han Li remained composed. The fat old man approached, saluting deeply. "Many thanks for your assistance. Senior, might Junior know your esteemed name?" "Junior is Yellow Maple Valley's Lei Wanhei. We cannot thank you enough." Ni Ying and the others joined in, offering respectful salutations to Han Li. The Giant Sword Sect's Shi Qian, Masked Moon Sect's Tang Minghua, Heavenly Imperial Fortress Qian Huan pays their respects to Senior. "Senior." Han Li stroked his chin and wore an odd expression on his face. Before him stood the plump, elderly man known as Senior Marshal Uncle Lei, who had once exchanged medicinal herbs for pill formulas. Although Lei Wanhei had been simply following the customary etiquette of the cultivation world, Han Li couldn't help but find his behavior unusual. Beside him stood a striking woman, Ni Yan, whom he had met only once before as Senior Marshal's sister Ni, back when she had defended the Murong brothers from Senior Marshal Brother Lu at Yellow Maple Valley. He knew of her talent and her beauty, and he recalled that countless male disciples had admired her in the past. Now, Seeing her as a golden core cultivator, Han Li's expression reflected a mixture of surprise and contemplation. Han Li observed both Lei Wanhei and Ni Yan silently, and this scrutiny seemed to unsettle Lei Wanhei. Not only did this senior appear surprisingly young, but there was also an unsettling familiarity to his face. Lei Wanhei felt an inexplicable shock ripple through him, a sense that he had seen this man before. At the same time, Ni Yan's eyes widened in astonishment, a mixture of confusion and recognition flickering in her gaze. Finally, Han Li broke the silence. It seems Martial Uncle Lei truly doesn't remember me. However, the pill formulas you gave me back then were of great help. Upon hearing the words, Martial Uncle, Lei Wan's jaw dropped. His mind spun in disbelief, struggling to piece together the connection. When Han Li mentioned the pill formulas, the memory hit him like a bolt of lightning, and he stammered in astonishment. Martial Uncle? Pill formulas? You're? Those nearby were equally dumbstruck. To see a nascent soul stage cultivator calling Lei Wanhei Martial Uncle was beyond comprehension. Ni Yan, however, took a moment longer to process it. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with disbelief. You're Martial Uncle Li's disciple, Han Li, junior martial brother Han? Han Li smiled faintly, genuinely surprised that she remembered him. During his qi condensation stage, he had remained low profile and unknown. But after surviving the trial by blood and fire and becoming Li Huayuan's disciple at the Foundation establishment stage, his achievements drew attention. When the 6 devilish Dao sects invaded the state of Yu, his reputation grew even further, and Ni Yan had clearly taken note of his deeds. Seeing him now, unchanged in appearance but vastly more powerful, she called out his name instinctively. Lei Wan's mind reeled. Seeing a former junior rising to nascent soul status was astonishing. He felt his throat dry and his thoughts scattered, barely able to comprehend the transformation before him. Han Li, however, maintained calm composure. Martial Uncle Lei, there's no need to be so surprised. This isn't the place to talk. We can converse as we travel. Lei Wan's expression wavered before he bitterly chuckled, acknowledging Han Li's overwhelming strength with humility. I don't dare accept the title of Martial Uncle. Since Senior Han has already entered Nascent Soul, I am your junior, he admitted, preserving the utmost respect despite his inner astonishment. The other 3 companions slowly grasped the relationship between Han Li and Lei Wanhei, their expressions shifting to disbelief and awe. Han Li paid little attention to their reactions. After a pause, he nodded. Since fellow Taoist Lei says this, we won't be polite. Let's depart immediately. Your speed is rather slow, so I'll be leading. He then activated a small, exquisite item from his storage pouch. With a flick of his hand, a square object appeared in midair, enveloped in red light. Under the power of spell seals, it expanded into a wind-riding chariot, over 30 meters wide. Get in the chariot, Han Li commanded bluntly. Lei Wanhei and the others, trusting him, quickly entered. Once aboard, Han Li infused his spiritual power into the chariot. It trembled briefly before tearing through the sky like a streak of white light, vanishing from sight in moments. The others marveled at the incredible speed, relieved that they would evade pursuit from spell warriors. As they traveled, Han Li asked casually, fellow Taoists, the state of Fengyuan should have fallen under the control of the spell warriors. Why were you there, and how did you encounter a nascent soul spell warrior blocking your path? If that area weren't remote, escape would have been impossible even with intervention. Lei Wanhei hesitated, then explained carefully. They had been under orders from the 9 Nations Union, performing an important task during the Moulan invasion. Forced to take a remote route back, they killed several low-grade spell warriors along the way, only to be discovered by a nearby nascent soul spell warrior. Knowing they couldn't prevail if scattered, they fought desperately, surviving only by chance until Han Li appeared. Gratitude and amazement were clear in Lei Wan's gaze. Han Li's tone remained indifferent as he moved on, asking about his master. Fellow Taoist Lei, is Master Li Huayuan still well? Lei Wan's response carried a tinge of sadness. Senior Han, junior martial brother Li died 100 years ago fighting the Moulan spell warriors. His wife never formed a golden core and passed away naturally. A subtle shadow crossed Han Li's expression. He then inquired about his fellow disciples. Lei Wan's sigh was heavy. Though some had reached false core stage, none had formed a golden core, and he refrained from further elaboration, leaving Han Li lost in thought. Memories of Yu Kun, Song Meng, Zhang Weinang, and others surfaced, bringing a faint sorrowful reflection. Ni Yan broke the silence, asking, "Senior Han, would you consider returning to Yellow Maple Valley?" Han Li's brow rose. "Return? No. I am an elder of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's Drifting Cloud sect. I am satisfied there." Disappointment flickered across Ni Yan's face, and Lei Wan's expression shifted uneasily. The others remained silent, unfamiliar with Han Li. After a moment, Ni Yan asked, "Would you happen to recognize Xiao Queer?" Han Li was taken aback briefly. He looked at her with a strange expression. "Xiao Queer? Of course I do. You know that little girl?" At that same moment, the image of that young, spirited girl came to mind. Han Li had a deep impression of the young girl he had recommended to join Yellow Maple Valley. But soon, his thoughts turned to the small old man who had accepted her as a disciple. Senior Martial Brother Ma. A trace of sadness passed over him as he remembered this mentor. The small old man had likely never reached the Golden Core stage due to his age. Yet he had been one of Han Li's closest friends during his time at Yellow Maple Valley. Han Li feared he had long since passed away. As they continued speaking, a soft smile appeared on the young woman's face, mingling feigned annoyance with a hint of delight. She said gently, "Little girl, Junior Martial Sister Xiao is no longer a child. She has been married and entered the core formation stage decades ago." Han Li, recovering from his surprise, smiled faintly. "Oh, she entered core formation too? That is indeed surprising," he remarked. Ni Ying added, "I've heard Junior Martial Sister Xiao speak many times about how Senior brought her into the sect. She has always felt deep gratitude and concern for Senior Han." Han Li's smile faded slightly, replaced by a calm and almost indifferent expression. "At the time, I simply introduced her to Senior Martial Brother Ma because of her aptitude. Nothing more. That is a matter of the past," he said quietly. Ni Yan and Lei Wanhei exchanged awkward glances, silently acknowledging that attempts to lure Han Li back to the sect had failed. They understood well why he had no intention of returning. Han Li had been treated as expendable during the Nine Nations Union events because he was only a minor Foundation establishment disciple. It was understandable why he felt detached from Yellow Maple Valley. Then, Han Li's expression shifted as he turned to the middle-aged masked moon cultivator, Tang Minghua, and asked, "Did you have a female cultivator by the name of Nangang Wan? How is she now?" There was a sudden gloom in his voice. Tang Minghua, surprised, replied respectfully, "Ah, Senior knows Martial Aunt Nangang? She is currently overseeing the sect and doing very well." Han Li's shock gave way to a small trace of joy. "Martial Aunt? She has reached the Nascent Soul stage?" Tang Minghua nodded. "Martial Aunt Nangang entered Nascent Soul over 100 years ago and is now one of the elders of our sect. Senior must have been an old friend of Martial Aunt Nangang?" Han Li's eyes dimmed slightly as he spoke. "Old friend, yes, it could be considered so. She showed me great kindness in the past. I've always wanted to meet her again, but I was occupied with too many matters over the years and never had the chance." Tang Minghua's eyes lit up. Although Martial Aunt Nangang rarely sees guests, Senior should easily be able to meet her. In 3 months, Martial Aunt Nangang will marry Elder Wei of the Flowing Mind sect in a Tao companion ceremony, officially pairing them as cultivators. This celebration was meant for high-grade cultivators of the Nine Nations Union. But since Senior is her old friend, he will certainly be invited. At that, Han Li's mind buzzed, and he barely heard the rest. His gaze hardened as he asked coldly, "Tao companion ceremony?" Tang Minghua continued cautiously, "Yes, she is to marry Elder Wei Lycan of the Flowing Mind sect. He reached Nascent Soul 300 years ago, is a cultivation genius, and didn't come from the Heavenly South. Both sects worked hard to make this union possible." Under Han Li's icy gaze, Tang Minghua shivered. Yet just as suddenly, Han Li's expression softened. In a gentle tone, he said, "There is no need to fear. Fellow Taoist Tang, I have no ill intentions. I merely heard that an old love of mine is about to become someone else's. And I became a bit restless. Now that I know the situation, I will attend the ceremony and celebrate my friend's happiness." The middle-aged cultivator sighed in relief, repeatedly welcoming Han Li, who simply offered a faint smile in return. The others in the chariot also relaxed. After all, the 6 sects of Yu were now practically united, and they wished no harm to one another. Han Li then asked a few questions about the 6 sects of Yu. The 5 accompanying cultivators answered easily, as the matters were not particularly important. But when Han Li heard that Yellow Maple Valley's ancestor Lingu had reached the end of his life, he frowned briefly before quickly hiding his concern. Then, recalling something, Han Li asked, "Ah yes, Martial Ant Nangong should have a younger cousin named Nangong Bing, a core formation cultivator in your sect." Tang Minghua seemed confused. "Nangong Bing? Senior must be mistaken. Martial Ant Nangong has always been solitary. I've never heard of a younger cousin." Han Li's astonishment was clear. "Nangong Bing? She should be a female core formation cultivator. Could it be that you don't remember?" Tang Minghua smiled wryly. "If such a person existed in our sect, I would know. I can assure you, there is no such woman here." Lei Wanhei added, "Fellow Taoist Tang speaks the truth. If such a cultivator existed, we would know. Where did Senior hear of this person?" Han Li could only shake his head. "It's nothing, just a misunderstanding," he said, though internally he realized the truth. Nangong Bing was actually Nangong Wan, using some method to alter her appearance. That explained her earlier behavior and unusual expression. After this, Han Li lost interest in further discussion. His expression darkening, he guided the chariot forward silently, and the others, seeing his mood, dared not speak. Less than half a day later, Han Li stopped the wind-riding chariot at a nameless mountain. Standing up, he said calmly, "We part here. This place is only a day from the border of the state of Fengyuan. It should be safe. I have matters to attend to and cannot continue with you." Lei Wanhei and the others thanked Han Li again for saving their lives and departed on their own. Han Li said nothing further, turning the chariot and disappearing from sight in an instant. Observing this, an older heavenly imperial fortress cultivator named Xian asked, "Fellow Taoist Lei, is it true that Senior Han was once your disciple at Yellow Maple Valley?" Lei Wanhei frowned. "Do you think I speak empty words?" He was annoyed, as Han Li, once his junior, now vastly surpassed him. Cultivator Qian continued thoughtfully, asking Ni Yan how long he had cultivated. When Ni Yan mentioned cultivating for 200 years to reach early core formation, Qian's eyes widened. Senior Han spent only 200 years before condensing Nascent Soul. "Do you know what this means?" The giant sword sect cultivator exclaimed in astonishment. And Qian solemnly explained, "It is quite possible he may reach deity transformation stage. Tens of thousands of years have passed since this last occurred. Though cultivators at this stage soon disappear, each was unrivaled in the short time they were here. The entire heavenly south, be they righteous, devilish, or even neutral, all unite during this time, as there is none capable of withstanding an early deity transformation stage cultivator." After some thought, Ni Yan smiled and said, "Brother Qian must be exaggerating. Although fellow Taoist Han managed to reach the Nascent Soul stage in such a short time, reaching deity transformation is still far beyond reach. It isn't something that can be done so easily. In fact, if he reaches the late Nascent Soul stage, he would already be capable of proclaiming his own sect a hegemon of their side. That outcome seems much more likely." With a spirited glint appearing in his eyes, the cultivator surnamed Qian nodded slowly and said, "Hee, perhaps I do think too much. But if Senior Han avoids any mishaps, he will surely become a greatly influential figure in the heavenly south. Given his deep connections to Yellow Maple Valley, if he were to join us, I believe it wouldn't be long before we could reclaim the state of Yu." Lei Wanhei let out a sigh after a moment of silence and said, "Connections? Fellow Taoist, You must understand that although Senior Han originally came from Yellow Maple Valley, he is now an elder of the Heavenly Tao Alliance's Drifting Cloud sect. He has no intention of returning, regardless of which sect he belongs to. Yellow Maple Valley cannot hope to sway him. The others were momentarily speechless. The Giant Sword Sect cultivator asked doubtfully, "Why does Senior Han treat your sect this way? After all, that was his home. Does he intend to repay the kindness the sect has given him?" Lei Wanhei shook his head and replied, "I cannot reveal all the details, but the odds aren't favorable. However, it seems that Senior Han has a deep relationship with Masked Moon Sect's Senior Nanlong. Perhaps Senior Nanlong can try speaking with him. Even if he doesn't rejoin our 6 sects, at least a good relationship could be formed." Tang Minghua responded thoughtfully, "That might be possible. I will have to return to the sect and inquire about the nature of Senior Han's relationship with Martial Ant Nanlong. Leave it be. Roping in a Nascent Soul stage cultivator is beyond us. Let the elders handle it. This Senior Han is expected to appear at the ceremony in 3 months." Lei Wanhei said, glancing around before frowning. "Regardless, we should hurry back to the 9 Nations Union. It isn't safe here." Hearing this, the others fell silent and swiftly took to the skies. Though Lei Wanhei spoke effortlessly, inwardly he was troubled. How could he inform Ancestor Ling Hu that a disciple he had once abandoned had become as powerful as the ancestor himself? Moreover, Han Li's resentment toward Yellow Maple Valley only complicated matters. Sharing this would be tantamount to directly rebuking his martial senior. He could only sigh repeatedly along the journey, gloomily continuing on his way. Meanwhile, Han Li, having left Lei Wanhei and the others behind, put away the conspicuous wind-riding chariot and began flying using ordinary light. He had just received troubling news about Nanlong Wan, and needed to calm himself to think carefully. In the past, he and Nanlong Wan had only been intimate once and had only met a couple of times. Because of the vast difference in cultivation, they had treated each other as indifferent strangers. But now, after successfully forming his golden core and reaching Nascent Soul, Han Li felt worthy of her, and the thought that Nanlong Wan was about to become Tao companions with someone else shook him to his core. He knew he could not pretend ignorance. In Han Li's mind, the only man who could marry Nanlong Wan in this lifetime was himself. Moreover, as the man who had taken Nanlong Wan's vital yin, he believed she must harbor some feelings for him. He could not allow the celebration to proceed smoothly. Han Li weighed his options carefully. He could either go to the Masked Moon sect immediately and attempt to stealthily take Nanlong Wan away, or wait for the celebration 3 months later and make his move openly. Each approach had its advantages. The first method was easier, but he doubted whether Nanlong Wan would leave willingly. She had spent years at the Masked Moon sect and had become an elder. Leaving without objections would be unlikely. The second option, appearing at the celebration, was far more challenging. He would have to confront the Masked Moon sect, the 6 sects of Yu, and even the 9 Nations Alliance. However, success would allow him to take Nanlong Wan in a just and honorable manner, ensuring no future troubles. There was, of course, a third, simpler method, eliminating Wei Lycan entirely. But this was the most dangerous approach. The Flowing Mind sect was not small, it was the largest sect in the 9 Nations Union, boasting 5 nascent soul stage elders, far stronger than the Drifting Cloud sect. Any attempt to act against Wei Lycan could expose Han Li to extreme retaliation. After much deliberation, Han Li decided on a compromise. First, he would hurry to the Masked Moon sect to ascertain Nanlong Wan's intentions. If she hesitated or faced difficulties leaving, he might risk confronting the Flowing Mind sect and attempt to eliminate Wei Lycan. If that failed, he would simply wait for the celebration and openly propose to her. Regardless of circumstances or her willingness, he was determined to take her away. Few things in his life had stirred such resolve in him, normally guided by reason rather than emotion. This time he would act solely from the heart. With his course of action decided, Han Li's spirits lifted. He increased his flight speed and quickly traveled toward the Masked Moon sect. Meanwhile, the 6 sects of Yu, having been defeated, had sought refuge within the 9 Nations Alliance. They established themselves in the state of Biliang, a sparsely populated country with limited cultivation resources. They could not afford to be choosy in selecting who would join the 6 sects. And constant conflict with local sects had left them with far inferior resources compared to their original lands. Over the years, the 6 sects gradually regained strength, and the Masked Moon sect emerged as the strongest among them, occupying a mountain range rich in spirit veins. The Gemcut Mountains, where the sect was based, were divided into 3 levels, the lowest for low-grade cultivators, the middle for core formation cultivators, and the top for those beyond, with only the most skilled allowed at higher levels. Among the sect's stewards, all but one, Yuan Kun, the mortal affairs steward, were foundation establishment cultivators. Yuan Kun, a chi condensation cultivator, owed his position to the Yuan clan, who had helped the Masked Moon sect when it first arrived in Biliang. Though lacking prospects in cultivation, Yuan Kun managed his duties smoothly, drawing on connections and handling tasks without error. However, within the sect, low-grade cultivators respected him little, and the other stewards looked down on him due to the rules of seniority. Undeterred, Yuan Kun lived his days leisurely, unaware of the danger closing in. One day, Yuan Kun ventured to a nearby mortal village with 2 lower cultivation disciples to purchase everyday goods. But unbeknownst to him, after passing through 3 of these stores, an indiscernible trace of spiritual sense stealthily wrapped around his clothes, attentively watching this trifling chi condensation cultivator. Not long after Yuan Kun began shopping in the village, he smoothly gathered all the items he needed and flew back to the Gemcut Mountains with his 2 assistants. Their journey was calm at first, but only 15 kilometers away from the city, a sudden flash of silver light appeared in front of them. A gorgeous young woman emerged, her presence radiant and captivating. She smiled with a charm that seemed almost unreal, and before Yuan Kun could speak or announce their sect identity, she exhaled a slow, mesmerizing pink mist from her mouth. The mist spread quickly, enveloping all 3 of them at once. Yuan Kun and his companions, their cultivation too weak to resist such a powerful enchantment, inhaled the scent and immediately felt their minds clouding. Their consciousness faded rapidly, and in moments, they collapsed to the ground, entirely unconscious. Without hesitation, the young woman waved her sleeve, releasing a soft white mist that lifted the 3 captives and brought them neatly to her side. She glanced at their faces, giggled with delight, and her body glowed with a silver light as she took to the skies, carrying them away with effortless grace. The flight continued for over 5 kilometers, finally ending in a desolate forest, where an azure-robed youth sat cross-legged beneath a massive ancient tree. The white light disappeared as they landed silently before him, and the young woman floated gracefully to the ground. Bowing slightly, she addressed him with clear respect. "Master, I've brought the people." They called themselves Masked Moon sect cultivators. "They should be what you're looking for." The youth opened his eyes, sharp and calm, and asked with measured indifference, "You didn't alarm any others?" This youth was Han Li, who had spent the last month quietly moving through the state of Biliang. He had a very specific purpose: to locate Nangong Wan without alerting anyone unnecessarily. Knowing the risks of a direct visit, he had chosen to operate from the shadows, observing carefully from nearby towns. Han Li understood the limitations of low-grade disciples very well. Those in the early stages of cultivation were deeply tied to the mortal world, and even a simple visit to a town would draw attention. With his extraordinary spiritual sense, however, he could detect their movements effortlessly, no matter how discreet they tried to be. Originally, he had been tracking another chi condensation disciple, but when a steward-level disciple appeared in the town, Han Li adjusted his target. Using a thread of spiritual awareness, he guided Silvermoon to capture the disciple and his 2 companions. They were swiftly brought to the forest where Han Li awaited. Knowing his master's current mood was serious, Silvermoon abandoned any teasing and reported in earnest that capturing the 3 chi condensation disciples had been easy, and the process had gone unnoticed. Han Li, expressionless, confirmed, "Well done. With your Demon Fox illusion techniques combined with my Dream Tear technique, We will extract everything we need from him." Obediently, Silvermoon exhaled a thick pink mist over the three captives. Filling the area, Han Li stepped into the mist himself. And within moments, faint pulses of azure light began to glow from within, signaling the activation of his technique. Around them, the gem-cut mountains rose imposing and strange, though its name suggested refinement and beauty. Its appearance was rough and oversized, a massive stretch of uneven terrain. The main mountain spanned tens of kilometers, with a smooth lower half sloping gently, while the center rose steeply, thick with spiritual qi, where core formation cultivators had established their homes. To protect the upper reaches, formidable spell restrictions had been placed, leaving only carefully maintained paths for low-grade disciples. Disguised by the appearance exchange arts, Han Li had transformed perfectly into Yuan Kun, mimicking his stature, demeanor, and even restraining his cultivation to qi condensation to maintain the illusion. After extracting all necessary information from Yuan Kun's memories and imprisoning him and his companions in a hollow tree, Han Li boldly entered the Gem-Cut Mountains, relying on the Steward Medallion to pass security unnoticed. Rather than heading straight to the top, Han Li first carried out Yuan Kun's mundane duties. He delivered the items purchased in the mortal town to the market city on the mountain's lower corner, a bustling place where thousands of disciples traded for rare goods. He left each item at the stores and observed the reactions of the shopkeepers, carefully blending in and following Yuan Kun's typical routine. From the memories of his captives, Han Li learned more about Nanlong Wan. Though she was about to be married, she remained selectively open to visitors, even for high-ranking disciples. As the youngest Nascent Soul cultivator in the Masked Moon sect, Nanlong Wan's beauty and talent commanded admiration across the sect, and even low-grade disciples harbored secret affections for her, including Yuan Kun himself. Han Li couldn't help but be slightly bemused as he observed these memories, realizing just how infatuated some were, even with such limited interactions. Once his deliveries were complete, and Yuan Kun's other daily routines observed, Han Li felt the time was right. As evening approached, he began his ascent, following Yuan Kun's typical path up the mountain. Despite his qi condensation cultivation, Yuan Kun had a small residence on the second level, which Han Li bypassed, instead flying along a low-altitude tool toward the top. He avoided restricted areas with care, knowing that any interference with the higher-level defenses could be disastrous. Finally, Han Li reached the border between the second and third levels of the mountain. Two Foundation establishment cultivators immediately blocked his way. One pale-skinned cultivator frowned, his voice stern as he shouted, "Yuan Kun, what did you come here for? You should know that you have no business here." Hesitating slightly, Han Li, maintaining Yuan Kun's voice and demeanor, replied cautiously, "Martial uncles. This martial nephew wishes to see martial ancestor Nanlong. Would martial uncles be able to report this?" Once the two cultivators recovered from their shock, they harshly rebuked him without further thought. "What are you saying? Yuan Kun, are you awake? You must be daydreaming to think you can see martial ancestor Nanlong." Han Li wore a miserable expression and said, "When this martial nephew went out to purchase a few items, I encountered a senior with an unfathomable cultivation. He wanted me to give something to martial ancestor Nanlong, and he even placed a restriction on my body, saying that only martial ancestor Nanlong would be able to dispel it." The pale-skinned cultivator who was listening looked bewildered and asked, "Senior, was he a core formation cultivator?" Han Li continued, his voice heavy with dejection. I'm not entirely sure, but this cultivator claimed to be an old friend of martial ancestor Nanlong and wished to send her a congratulatory gift. Having heard that her grand celebration was drawing near, there are still some matters I need to personally convey to her." The burly cultivator who stood nearby furrowed his brows and asked with alarm, "An old friend of martial ancestor? Could he also be a Nascent Soul cultivator?" After the pale-skinned cultivator recovered from his initial shock, he mused, "It's possible, but if this senior was already present, why didn't he personally come to the mountain to deliver the gift?" Han Li shook his head helplessly. "Who knows? Perhaps this senior has other matters to attend to, or maybe he finds it inconvenient." The burly cultivator speculated. Then, looking at Han Li intently, he said, "Martial nephew Yuan, extend your hand. Let us see this restriction on your body." Han Li had anticipated this and calmly extended his arm. He focused his spiritual power, allowing the cultivators to sense the complex restriction laid upon him. The burly cultivator grabbed Han Li's arm and quickly showed astonishment. The pale-skinned cultivator followed suit, placing 2 fingers on Han Li's arm, his face gradually revealing the same expression of surprise. Finally, the pale-skinned cultivator relaxed slightly and spoke more softly. "Indeed, this is a fearsome restriction. Judging by its complexity, it appears to have been laid by a nascent soul cultivator. But you cannot simply climb the mountain with this alone. First, take out the congratulatory gift. One of us will bring it to martial ancestor Nanlong to verify whether this person is truly an old friend." Han Li's expression became bitter, but after a moment, he nodded. Carefully, he retrieved a long wooden box from his storage pouch and handed it over. He added anxiously, "This is fine, but martial uncle must clearly explain the matter of the restriction on my body." The lid of the wooden box had a faint silver restriction talisman resting atop it. From its spiritual fluctuations, it was evident that the box contained something extremely important, and the talisman was designed to prevent anyone from opening it prematurely. The pale-skinned cultivator nodded. "Wait here for a while. Junior Martial Brother Ma, I am going." With that, he took the box and shot off on his magic tool, leaving Han Li standing alone, his thoughts heavy with anticipation. Although he was confident that Nanlong Wan would accept the gift, he could not help but feel slightly apprehensive. He answered the occasional questions of the remaining guard, who was curious about the senior that delivered the gift. Han Li explained that the senior wore a cloak, hiding all identifying features, and he could not tell whether the person was male or female. After a meal's worth of time passed, the pale-skinned cultivator returned, empty-handed. Martial ancestor Nanlong said that this person is truly an old friend of hers. "I am authorized to bring you to see her and dissolve the restriction." Han Li's heart leapt with joy, and he quickly followed the cultivator up the mountain. "Be careful," the pale-skinned cultivator warned. "There are paths you cannot take. No matter what, the restrictions here are far more dangerous than those on the central level. Even I would not survive if I were caught in them." Han Li acknowledged the warning. Suddenly, a streak of blue light shot toward them. The pale-skinned cultivator recognized it and immediately assumed a respectful posture. The light faded to reveal a middle-aged cultivator in embroidered robes, exuding an imposing aura. He glanced coldly at Han Li. "Martial nephew son, why have you brought a chi condensation cultivator to the top of the mountain? Do you not understand the rules here?" The pale-skinned cultivator explained hurriedly. "Martial Senior Lan, this martial nephew is only following martial ancestor Nanlong's orders. I would not dare do this otherwise." Han Li took note that the man was only an early core formation cultivator and maintained a respectful demeanor. Careful not to show arrogance. The embroidered-robed cultivator, still intrigued, demanded, "Martial Aunt Nanlong wishes to see this person? Explain how this came to be." The pale-skinned cultivator recounted the events, explaining the mysterious senior and the restriction placed on Han Li's body. An old friend of Martial Aunt Nanlong placed a restriction on his body? The man frowned, then gave Han Li a penetrating gaze. "Let me see this restriction." Han Li cursed silently at the intrusive request but complied. The man examined his wrist carefully. After a moment, he nodded. "This is indeed unusual, but the restriction is not malicious. It seems the senior did not intend any harm. You may go see Martial Aunt Nanlong." With that, the embroidered-robed cultivator departed in a flash of blue light, leaving the path clear. The pale-skinned cultivator breathed a sigh of relief, muttering, "Martial Uncle Lan's incorporeal evasion technique truly lives up to his name." Even though he is early core formation, late core formation cultivators would struggle to deal with him. Han Li, curious, could not help but wonder if this martial Senior Lan had any connection to the old eccentric Chang he had encountered during the trial by blood and fire. Perhaps as a descendant or disciple. As they continued toward the peak, the two encountered no one. the top level of the Gemcut Mountains being sparsely inhabited. The pale-skinned cultivator eventually led Han Li to a cave residence near the summit. "This is martial ancestor Nanlong's meditation area," he explained. "Speak carefully when you address her, and mention only the restriction on your body. She may have benefits in store for you if you handle it well." He reported Han Li's arrival respectfully before stepping back. A voice from inside replied, "I understand. Have the disciple enter alone. You may take your leave." The door flickered with yellow light and opened. Han Li stepped forward confidently. To his surprise, a young woman in yellow short-sleeved robes, appearing around 18 and possessing early foundation establishment cultivation, examined him carefully. Finding nothing amiss, she said coldly, "Follow me. Martial ancestor is waiting for you in the main hall." Han Li followed her through a short corridor and several small side rooms. Finally arriving at the main hall. The hall was elegantly decorated, with an unknown essence burning quietly in one corner, and two small flower pots each housing a precious herb. At the center, an exquisite square wooden table was surrounded by light green straw chairs. One chair was occupied by a young woman with black hair dressed in white. She sat silently, looking down at the huge sparkling silver sword in her hand. When the white-clothed woman saw Han Li enter, she gently stroked the silver sword resting before her, her fingers lingering on its hilt for a moment before carefully returning it to the wooden box. She then raised her head and looked at him, her gaze calm, steady, and unwavering. For Han Li, it was as if time had frozen. The face before him was one he had yearned to see for countless days and nights, a face that had haunted his dreams. A delicate, slightly pointed chin, a perfectly shaped nose, and eyes that shone like twin stars. Bright and mesmerizing, the sight of her stirred a warmth deep within his heart, a feeling he had not known in years. A dormant flame rekindled, words and thoughts fled from his mind, leaving only an overwhelming, almost suffocating, wave of emotion that surged from his chest to his fingertips. Nanlong Wan noticed the intensity of his gaze, and for a brief moment, she was taken aback. A frown of thoughtfulness creased her brow as she instinctively considered the situation. She then turned to the yellow-clothed woman who had guided Han Li into the hall and said calmly, "You go down first. I will speak with him alone." The yellow-clothed woman blinked in brief surprise, but immediately lowered her head and replied respectfully, "Yes, martial ancestor." She quietly left the hall, vanishing from sight, leaving the space between Han Li and Nanlong Wan empty, yet heavy with anticipation. Han Li waited a few heartbeats, until he was certain she was gone, before cautiously scanning the room with his spiritual sense. Seeing that they were truly alone, he directed his attention fully to Nanlong Wan. He formed a precise hand incantation, and in an instant, sparks of energy crackled across his body. With a flash of azure light, his form grew several inches taller, and his true, awakened appearance was revealed. Nanlong Wan's eyes widened slightly, and her expression became complex, a mixture of curiosity, subtle affection, and contemplation. "So it really is you, Han Li," she murmured, her voice calm but layered with meaning, carrying a weight of memories and unspoken emotions. Unsure of how to begin, Han Li stammered, You knew I was coming?" Immediately, a tinge of regret crept in. He felt clumsy and awkward for speaking so plainly after so many years. Nanlong Wan's lips curved slightly in a soft, patient smile. "You?" she corrected gently. "Call me Wanner." Her bright eyes sparkled in a way that made Han Li's heart leap. The small gesture of familiarity and softness was enough to soothe his anxiety, making him feel both relief and a deep joy. "Wanner," he whispered, almost in disbelief, the name escaping his lips with an emotional weight he could hardly contain. The years of longing, the uncertainty, the dormant feelings, all surged forward. Seeing her before him, finally, confirmed what he had long suspected: she truly held feelings for him. His gaze lingered on her, fascinated and awed by her presence. Nanlong Wan, feeling his stare, blushed faintly and turned her head away, trying to hide a small measure of shyness. She teased in a soft, playful tone, "What's so interesting about looking at me? Could it be you think I'm more beautiful than your new concubine?" Alarmed by her words, Han Li's eyes widened. Concubine? So you knew about her as well? Nanlong Wan's gaze dropped to the floor, a faint trace of annoyance crossing her features. You have become a newly joined elder of the Drifting Cloud sect, and you recently condensed a nascent soul at around 200 years of age. How could I not know? After a pause, a mischievous glint appeared in her eyes. Was it the cultivator surnamed Tang? Han Li touched his chin, embarrassed by the situation, but nodded. Nanlong Wan's lips curved into a knowing, almost mysterious smile. She explained how Martial Nephew Tang had sent her news using a sound transmission talisman. And though at first she had doubted it, she eventually sought information about Han Li. She had learned of his recent achievements, his rise to the rank of elder in the Drifting Cloud sect, and even the details of his concubine, who remained in Soaring Skies City. Han Li tried to explain that he had only asked the concubine to follow an elder back to the sect and that delays had occurred. But Nanlong Wan interrupted. She displayed no anger over his taking another woman, though her expression softened when she mentioned her own impending marriage. Han Li's expression darkened slightly, concern creeping in, as he asked cautiously, "Do you truly plan to marry this person?" Nanlong Wan's red lips parted slightly, and her bright eyes flickered with emotion. She posed the question back to him. Why had he come? Did he want her to refuse marriage? Or did he intend to take her away? Han Li answered with absolute certainty, his voice unwavering. He had come to claim her as his wife. And anyone who dared to challenge him for her would first have to go through him. She blushed and shyly rebuked him, but he only smiled quietly, knowing it was best not to push further on matters of the heart, especially given the complex history between them. The mood grew heavier as Nanlong Wan's expression shifted from shyness to seriousness. She recounted the events of the trial by blood and fire, confessing that her initial instinct had been vengeance after Han Li had taken her virginity. She spoke of bitterness, anger, and the years she had guarded herself, and of the inner torment that followed. Han Li listened silently, unsure whether to laugh or cry at her candidness, and felt the weight of the years and their shared history pressing in. She revealed that his image had haunted her, becoming an inner demon of temptation during her cultivation, threatening to stunt her growth. The only ways to dispel this inner demon were to marry him or see him destroyed. Faced with such a choice, she had resolved to exterminate him, but fate intervened when the 6 Devil Dao sects invaded. And she encountered him once more. Seeing his continued progress softened her heart, and she realized that marriage could one day be possible, if circumstances allowed. Han Li remembered her cold, detached attitude when they first reunited after the battle and how it had left him frustrated. Even as he was overjoyed to see her, Nanlong Wan continued, detailing the aftermath of the sects of Yu's defeat, her attempts to rescue him, the injuries she suffered, and the careful concealment of her true identity. She had hoped to guide him, reveal her true appearance at the proper moment, and eventually secure marriage. But Han Li's actions, his stubbornness and greed, had foiled her careful plans, leaving her both exasperated and amused. Even as she glared fiercely at him, Han Li could detect the faint happiness flickering in her eyes, a quiet but undeniable sign of the deep feelings she had long hidden. Of course, Han Li could not have known that had he agreed to follow her back to the Masked Moon sect, Nanlong Wan would have certainly raised the prospect of marriage. Yet, in all likelihood, the outcome would have been less fulfilling. He would have casually agreed to become another woman's Dao companion, resolving her inner demons in a half-hearted way. The one who married him would have likely been someone that Nanlong Wan had personally sought out. There isn't much to be said after we parted. I returned to the Masked Moon sect. With those quiet words, Nanlong Wan began to recount everything that had happened after her separation from Han Li. She explained that once the Masked Moon sect had firmly established itself in the state of Biliang, she secretly ventured into the state of Yu in search of him. But what she found was devastating: rumors that Han Li had been hunted down by the Ghost Spirit sect. No one knew the details. Soon after, her infiltration was discovered by the Devil Dao, forcing her to retreat to the Nine Nations Alliance. From then on, all traces of Han Li vanished. She believed him dead. With time, That painful thought turned into calm acceptance. Her cultivation advanced smoothly, and she eventually condensed her nascent soul, becoming an elder of the Masked Moon sect. Now, standing before Han Li again, she spoke with a tone that was calm, even serene, but underneath, emotion lingered. Han Li listened silently, his expression shifting as he learned about her silent efforts and struggles over the years. Warmth stirred in his heart. When he finally spoke, his voice carried quiet confusion. "What's this about Wei Lycan?" Nangong Wan's calm mask slipped, revealing a flash of disgust. "Wei Lycan," she said coldly. "I met him by chance a few years ago. He acts noble and refined. But beneath that exterior, he's a hypocrite and a philanderer. He secretly practices vile yin drawing techniques on his 8 female disciples. I have no affection for him." She explained that she had rejected his proposal to marry her. But Han Li pressed further. If she had refused, what had changed? Her eyes hardened as she replied, "Do you know of the 3 great nascent soul cultivators in the heavenly south?" Han Li nodded, his voice low and cautious. "Of course, one from the Righteous Tao, one from the Devilish Tao, and one from the 9 Nations Alliance, each just a step away from deity transformation. They maintain balance among the great powers. Don't tell me Wei Lycan is connected to one of them?" "Exactly," Nangong Wan answered bitterly. "His great uncle is Wei Wuxia, one of the 3 great cultivators. A terrifying man who practices a venomous art so lethal that he can kill with a simple gesture. His power is unimaginable." Han Li's brows furrowed, his expression darkening. "So this Wei Wuxia personally pressured you?" "Not directly," Nangong Wan said, "but his influence reached me nonetheless." She explained that after the Masked Moon sect's former great elder passed away, leadership fell to a senior martial sister of hers, a cunning, ambitious woman who was constantly at odds with her. When Wei Wuxia visited that woman, something between them changed. Not long after, Nangong Wan was betrayed. Her voice trembled slightly as she went on. "During one of my female essence incarnation cycles, my senior martial sister suddenly used force to restrain me. She intended to make me marry Wei Lycan." Han Li was shocked. Is she insane? To turn against someone of her own sect like that? A bitter smile crossed Nangong Wan's face. Perhaps, but she was tempted by what Wei Wuxia offered. If the Masked Moon sect agreed to this marriage, the 6 sects could expand beyond Beliong, and Wei Lycan himself would leave his flowing mind sect to join us. To her, it was an irresistible bargain. So she ignored my will, spread word of the marriage, and prepared the celebration. I was trapped. Han Li finally understood the truth and let out a small laugh of relief. "So you never agreed to marry him?" "I was shocked when I heard those rumors." Nangong Wan gave him a sharp look. "Then why didn't you come sooner? If you had appeared a year earlier, none of this would have happened." Han Li hesitated, unsure of his own answer. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he had always cared for her, but for some reason, that feeling had been buried, subdued. It was only when he heard of her marriage that his emotions had surged to the surface, compelling him to act. Seeing his troubled expression, Nangong Wan approached him slowly, her voice soft yet firm. "In truth, I was no different, though our power has long surpassed that of mortals. We cultivators are unfamiliar with the ways of the heart. We are taught to suppress our emotions for the sake of clarity in cultivation. Even when we feel deeply, we bury it, until all that remains is calm endurance. But when I learned that you were still alive, I was overjoyed. I thought for 2 days before deciding to accept what I truly felt." Her delicate hand reached out and gently clasped Han Li's. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Han Li placed his other hand over hers, feeling her soft warmth and a strange peace spreading through him. Nangong Wan blushed and withdrew, glaring lightly at him, but Han Li only smiled. "Wanner," he said softly, "you seem calm despite being trapped. You must have a plan." A sly smile curved her lips. "You're quick to notice." "Yes, although I'm under house arrest. Only a few know of it. The ordinary disciples have no idea. That's why I could still receive Tang's sound transmission. There are several restrictions on me, but most of them are ordinary, things I can break whenever I wish. Only one is troublesome. The heart restraint technique. She explained that this technique had been placed on her personally by her senior martial sister. It was a rare form of control that used the caster's blood essence to forge a talisman. As long as that talisman remained intact, Nanlong Wan could be forced to obey simple commands within 50 kilometers of her captor. Fortunately, it couldn't control her spiritual power or magical techniques. Han Li's brows knitted. So your plan was to wait for the right moment? Nanlong Wan nodded with a calm smile. Yes, I planned to restore my full power a few days before the wedding. When the guards were relaxed, then flee. Once I was beyond the talisman's range, she could no longer control me. But now that you're here, she smiled playfully, I'll leave it to you. After all, you're the man who wishes to marry me, and from what I've heard, you're quite capable. Han Li frowned, murmuring, that heart restraint technique sounds troublesome. Apart from destroying the talisman, is there another way to break it? Perhaps not, she said lightly, but it doesn't matter. Once we're far away from this place, the restriction will be useless. Han Li's eyes gleamed with determination. If the talisman is in her hands, I can go and get it myself. I'll settle this debt for you. Nanlong Wan's expression softened, and she shook her head with a faint, teasing smile. I only said that to test your resolve. I never truly meant for you to go. She's a mid-nascent soul cultivator, far beyond us in strength. Let's leave quietly instead. If I must, I'll spend 10 years breaking that formation myself. Han Li said nothing. His gaze lingered on her, deep and thoughtful. In that silent moment, a quiet understanding passed between them. Han Li grew silent. The time for him to be united with this otherworldly woman was soon to come. Han Li smiled and confidently said, no matter, let us first see how it goes. If it doesn't succeed, we can make our escape. With me around, I'll be able to bring you out regardless of the restrictions on your body. Nanlong Wan studied him for a moment and seemed to realize there was no changing his mind. She bit her lips and said, fine, although I don't know the full extent of your abilities. Your confidence suggests you are skilled, but there is no need for you to take the initiative to find her. My senior martial sister's residence is layered with powerful restrictions. Instead, I'll draw her here, and then we can use the restrictions to capture her while her guard is down. Han Li nodded thoughtfully, then asked, but can you still use the restrictions in your cave residence? When I arrived, some seemed shattered. Nanlong Wan quickly reassured him. No worries. While some surface restrictions were destroyed by my senior martial sister, there remains one formidable hidden restriction that she has yet to discover. That one can still be used. Han Li rubbed his chin and said, excellent. In that case, I also have several sets of spell formation tools. While not particularly powerful, they can provide some level of impedance once placed. Hearing this, Nanlong Wan grew more confident. You have formation flags as well? Perfect. We cannot delay. I need half a day to remove the restrictions on my body and restore my magic power. You should start placing the spell formations during this time. Han Li pondered for a moment and then asked, if we restrain your senior martial sister, couldn't you take control of the masked moon sect? That would eliminate the need to flee. Nanlong Wan shook her head in surprise. That's impossible. Apart from my senior martial sister, there is another nascent soul cultivator. Though our relationship is good, he would never allow me to claim the title of Grand Elder illegitimately. I have no desire for a power struggle. I only want a peaceful place to quietly cultivate. Han Li shook his head and coldly smiled. Then leave it be. If this succeeds, you can follow me back to the Drifting Cloud sect, even if the Nine Nations Union is strong and Wei Wuya favors Wei Lycan. He would not dare provoke the Heavenly Tao Alliance alongside two nascent soul cultivators during an invasion of spell warriors. He then slapped his storage pouch and flipped his hand, summoning a pile of formation flags and plates. Nanlong Wan faintly smiled and sat down. Closing her eyes, she formed a complex incantation seal with her hands, and soon her snow-white robes glowed with a scarlet-red flame, rising a meter high and enveloping her entirely. Han Li sprang into action. His body blurred as he circled the hall, placing formation flags and plates strategically. Radiant flashes of various colors briefly shimmered before sinking into the hall and disappearing. He made sure the formations covered only the hall area, and arranged them so carefully that they would remain hidden unless meticulously searched for. Although these formations were refined during his time as a core formation stage cultivator and lacked the power to challenge Nascent Soul cultivators, Han Li hoped they could still provide some assistance. After finishing, he muttered to himself and flicked his sleeve, releasing a streak of white light that transformed into a small white fox. "Master, are you not afraid Mistress Nanlong will be jealous?" the fox, Silvermoon, asked. Han Li raised his brows and replied, "Humph, who'd get jealous over an artifact spirit like you? I will face a mid-nascent soul cultivator soon, and she must not escape. The restrictions help, but I will need your assistance. A mid-nascent soul cultivator is far stronger than an early nascent soul cultivator. It will be difficult even with all my power." Silvermoon asked, "How do you want me to assist?" Han Li handed her an item from his storage pouch. "It's simple. Use this treasure at the right moment. You cannot allow her to escape." Silvermoon clasped the object with her claw. "Surprised? You're letting me use this?" Han Li calmly said, "Yes. If you control it, you can unleash more of its power than I could. I would consume magic power using it myself. So it's better in your hands. But you can only use it briefly, as artifact spirits cannot control other treasures for long periods." Silvermoon lowered her head, understanding, and rubbed the object fondly before flickering into the ground in a flash of silver light. Next, Han Li circled the hall again. Looking up at the ceiling with inspiration, he tossed his spirit beast pouch into the air, summoning a large swarm of black tainted gold devouring beetles that formed a 3-meter-wide cloud above him. Breathing onto the cloud, he infused it with an azure mist while forming an incantation seal with his hands. The insect cloud buzzed briefly, then transformed into specks of starlight that floated to the ceiling and disappeared, masking their aura completely. Satisfied, Han Li turned to Nanlong Wan. The flames around her shifted, forming a round red disc that pulsed strangely, affecting the spiritual qi in the hall and causing it to become restless. Han Li frowned and quickly struck a nearby stone pillar with a spell seal, creating a layer of azure barrier around Nanlong Wan. The spiritual qi returned to normal. He then summoned a straw chair and sat across from her, silently gazing at her captivating face. Lost in her beauty for a moment, he became entranced, until his figure abruptly vanished. Outside the hall, a woman spying on them was alarmed. Hearing Han Li's calm voice behind her, she froze. "Why are you spying on us? Are you not afraid your martial ancestor will rebuke you?" Han Li asked. The yellow-robed woman stammered, I wasn't spying. Martial ancestor hasn't emerged, and I was worried." Han Li's gaze was cold. "If you only wished to look, why hide so thoroughly? You even used a high-grade concealing spirit talisman. How did a mere foundation establishment cultivator like you get it?" The woman hesitated. There is no need to explain further." Han Li interrupted. "You will follow me back. Your martial ancestor will decide your fate." Fearful, she attempted to flee, flashing down the corridor, but after traveling about 30 meters, a nearby wall emitted a cloud of pink mist that enveloped her. The light surrounding her scattered, her body swayed, and she collapsed. In a flicker of yellow light, Silvermoon emerged from the wall and gracefully shook her tail several times before walking up to the young woman with a smile.